Hello, beautiful people. You've just landed on Arcane Paradox. Today's featured story is, what if Pomfrey's scan after Dementor attack revealed 34 loyalty redirects and Dumbledore's 48-year control scheme collapsed? If you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe and the notification bell. And if you're returning, you know the drill, like and share. Enough talk, let's get into the story. Chapter 1, Shattered Illusions Cold. Harry had never felt cold like this before, not during winters at the Dursleys when they'd shut off the heat to his cupboard, not even when Uncle Vernon had locked him out in the garden during a December snowfall for accidentally breaking a plate. This cold reached inside him, beyond flesh, beyond bone, gripping something essential that Harry hadn't known could be touched. The Hogwarts Express lurched, wheels screeching against the tracks as the train slowed unexpectedly. Through the window, rain lashed against the glass, distorting the darkening countryside beyond. Inside their compartment, Hermione exchanged worried glances with Ron while Neville clutched Trevor tightly against his chest. "We can't be there yet," Hermione whispered, checking her watch. The lamps flickered, then died. Darkness descended, absolute and smothering. "What's happening?" Ron's voice cracked. Harry felt something shift in the air, as though reality itself had gone thin and brittle. His breath formed clouds in front of his face, and the window beside him frosted over, delicate crystalline patterns spreading across the glass like ghostly fingers. "Someone's coming aboard," Hermione murmured, peering toward the corridor. A tall, hooded figure glided past their compartment, pausing at the door. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs as the door slowly slid open. The figure seemed to fill the entire doorway, black robes rippling though there was no breeze, face hidden beneath a hood. A gray, scabbed hand protruded from the folds of the cloak, and Harry's stomach turned at the sight of it. The creature drew a long, rattling breath, as though trying to inhale something more substantial than air. The cold intensified. Harry's ears filled with a high-pitched whine that gradually resolved into a woman's scream. A familiar scream. His mother. Not Harry. Please, not Harry. Harry. Someone was shaking him. Hermione. But her voice sounded distant, underwater. The cold penetrated deeper, and Harry felt something inside him, something that had always been there, though he'd never noticed it before, begin to unravel. Like pulling a loose thread on a sweater and watching the entire garment come undone. Threads of magic, countless strands of spells wound tightly around his core, began to loosen in the Dementor's presence. Harry felt a moment of strange clarity, like briefly surfacing from underwater, before darkness claimed him completely. Extreme reaction to Dementors, Headmaster. I've never seen anything like it. The boy has suffered terrible trauma, Poppy. It's hardly surprising. It's not just that. When I ran my diagnostic spells, I found irregularities. Harry kept his eyes closed, feigning sleep as he listened to the hushed voices nearby. His head throbbed dully, and his body felt strangely light, as though he'd shed a heavy coat he hadn't known he was wearing. What sort of irregularities? Dumbledore's voice was calm, but Harry detected an undercurrent of tension he'd never heard before. Spells, Albus. Dozens of them. Loyalty redirections, behavioral modifications, memory adjustments, ability suppressions. Madame Pomfrey's voice shook slightly. 34 separate enchantments, all layered so skillfully they'd never have been detected without the Dementor's interference. A long silence followed. "I see," Dumbledore finally said, his voice deliberately light. "A most concerning development. I shall look into it at once." "Look into it?" "Albus, most of these spells bear your magical signature." Another pause, longer this time. Harry fought to keep his breathing even, though his heart raced. "Poppy," Dumbledore's tone had changed completely, lower, more commanding. "I believe you may be overtired. Why don't you step away from my patient, Albus?" Madame Pomfrey's voice was suddenly steel. "I've already contacted St. Mungo's and the DMLE. Healer Brightwood and Auror Shacklebolt will be arriving momentarily. You've always been too clever for your own good, Poppy. Dumbledore sighed. I truly am sorry about this. Obliviate, Protego. The sharp crack of spell-meeting shield made Harry's eyes fly open. Professor McGonagall stood in the hospital wing doorway, wand extended, her face white with fury. Minerva, Dumbledore turned, his expression sorrowful. I'm afraid Poppy has come to some troubling misconceptions. Save it, Albus. McGonagall strode into the room, her emerald robe swishing around her ankles. I heard everything. And I've seen the diagnostic results myself. She gestured to a parchment clutched in her free hand. What have you done? Harry sat up slowly, drawing all eyes to him. The hospital wing spun briefly before settling into focus. Dumbledore stood near the foot of his bed, McGonagall by the door with her wand still raised, and Madame Pomfrey beside him, her hand protectively on his shoulder. Harry, Dumbledore smiled gently. How are you feeling, my boy? The question struck Harry as absurd, and suddenly, infuriating. Don't call me that, he said, surprising himself with the ice in his voice. I'm not your boy. Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Harry, you've had a terrible shock. The Dementor's effects. The Dementor didn't put 34 spells on me, Harry interrupted, clutching the bedsheet tightly. You did. The hospital wing doors burst open again. Kingsley Shacklebolt entered, his purple aura robes contrasting sharply with the white walls of the infirmary. Behind him came a severe-looking witch in lime-green healer's robes, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Headmaster Dumbledore, Kingsley's deep voice filled the room. I'm here to investigate some very disturbing allegations. Kingsley, old friend, Dumbledore's expression remained placid, though Harry noticed his hand drift casually toward his wand pocket. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The healer, Brightwood, Harry presumed, had already moved to his bedside, her wand tracing complex patterns over him. Poppy was right, she said grimly. 34 separate enchantments, most cast years ago, some as recently as 2 weeks. And yes, the majority bear Albus Dumbledore's magical signature. Albus Dumbledore, Kingsley said formally, I must ask you to surrender your wand and accompany me to the ministry for questioning. Dumbledore's eyes darted between them all, the twinkle long gone. For a moment, Harry thought he might resist. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. I have always acted in the greater good, he said quietly. Everything I've done has been necessary. Necessary? McGonagall's voice shook with rage. You've been manipulating a child, Albus. Controlling his mind, his magic, his very personality. Not just me, Harry said suddenly, a realization dawning. Hermione and Ron too, right? That's why they befriended me. And why Ron's always jealous and Hermione always pushes me to go to you with problems. Dumbledore said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. How extensive is this? Kingsley demanded. How many others? More than you can imagine, Dumbledore replied softly. A lifetime's work. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Then, with a movement so swift it was barely visible, Dumbledore's wand was in his hand. Stupefy. Kingsley bellowed, but the red jet of light passed through empty air. With a crack like a gunshot, Dumbledore had disapparated, supposedly impossible within Hogwarts grounds. The wards, McGonagall whispered. He's altered them. We need to secure the school, Kingsley said grimly, already moving toward the door. And begin testing everyone. As the adults rushed to action, Harry remained sitting in his hospital bed, strangely calm despite the chaos erupting around him. He felt different, like pieces of himself that had been buried were now floating to the surface. Memories shifted, emotions recalibrated, and thoughts that had always felt somehow slippery now came into sharp focus. Harry, Madame Pomfrey said gently, returning to his side. How are you feeling? Truly. Harry considered the question. Lighter, he finally said. And angry. And. He searched for the right word, curious. Curious? About who I really am, Harry clarified. Without his influence. The great hall hummed with bewildered conversation. Students clustered together at their house tables, speculating wildly about Dumbledore's sudden absence and the presence of Aurors throughout the castle. At the staff table, several chairs remained conspicuously empty. Professor McGonagall rose, tapping her goblet for silence. The hall quieted immediately. Students, she began, her voice steady despite the circumstances, I must inform you of a grave situation that has come to light. Headmaster Dumbledore has been found to have placed unauthorized and inappropriate magical influences on members of our school community. Whispers erupted, growing louder until McGonagall raised her hand. These influences include loyalty charms, behavioral modifications, and memory alterations. We have reason to believe these activities have been ongoing for many years and may affect many of you. The hall erupted again, this time with sounds of outrage and disbelief. Silence. McGonagall commanded. St. Mungo's has dispatched a team of mind healers who will be conducting evaluations of all students and staff over the coming days. These evaluations are mandatory but completely non-invasive. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table, acutely aware of the space around him. Ron and Hermione were absent, already undergoing testing. The other Gryffindors kept glancing at him nervously. News of his 34 enchantments had spread rapidly through the school. McGonagall continued detailing the testing schedule, but Harry's attention drifted. His mind felt clearer than it ever had before. Thoughts and connections that would have previously slipped away now crystallized with startling clarity. He realized with mounting anger how thoroughly his life had been orchestrated, his friendship with Ron on the train, his distrust of Slytherin House, even his willingness to risk his life yearly rather than seek adult help. Harry. He looked up to find Neville standing beside him, looking uncertain. Can I sit? Neville asked, gesturing to the empty space beside Harry. Sure, Harry nodded, surprised. Neville had never sought him out before. They've already tested me, Neville said quietly as he sat down. I had 7 compulsions. Not as many as you, but... He trailed off, staring at his hands. What kind? Harry asked. Confidence reduction. Memory foggers. One to make me clumsy. Neville's jaw tightened. One to make me fear Professor Snape beyond reason. Harry blinked. Snape? Why would Dumbledore want you to fear Snape? I don't know. But they found the same charm on several students. Neville looked up, and Harry was struck by the difference in his eyes, sharper, more focused. I've spent 3 years thinking I was nearly a squib, Harry. My magic's been partially blocked since I was 7. The realization hit Harry like a bludger. He's been weakening potential threats. Making sure no one got too powerful. Neville nodded grimly. That's what Healer Brightwood thinks too. As dinner concluded, Professor McGonagall approached Harry directly. Mr. Potter, if you would accompany me, she said, her voice gentler than he'd ever heard it. There are some matters we must discuss privately. McGonagall led him not to her office but to a small, comfortable room Harry had never seen before. A fire crackled in the hearth, and tea was already set out on a low table between 2 armchairs. Sit, please, she said, taking one of the chairs. She looked exhausted, the lines on her face deeper than usual. Professor, Harry began as he sat, how many people has he affected? McGonagall sighed. We're still determining the full extent, but preliminary results suggest most of the student body has at least one mild compulsion, and many staff members as well. Some, like yourself, were under far more extensive control. Like who? Mr. Weasley had 12 enchantments, mostly related to his friendship with you, jealousy triggers, loyalty redirects, and memory modifications about his family's financial arrangement with the headmaster. Financial arrangement? The Weasleys have been receiving a stipend from your vault, Harry, ostensibly for your care during summers. Molly and Arthur knew nothing about it. The funds were redirected to a separate account Albus controlled. Her lips thinned. Miss Granger had 17 enchantments, primarily affecting her trust in authority figures and books, along with loyalty binds to steer you toward Albus whenever possible. Harry's hands clenched into fists. And the teachers? I had 8 enchantments myself, McGonagall admitted, her voice tight with shame. Compulsions to overlook certain behaviors, to dismiss your concerns about dangers at Hogwarts, to never question Albus's decisions regarding your placement with the Dursleys. The betrayal stung, even though Harry knew she'd been as much a victim as he was. What about Snape? Why's he always hated me so much? McGonagall's expression darkened. Professor Snape is currently in St. Mungo's intensive care. His case is, particularly severe. 29 separate enchantments, some dating back to his own school days. His hatred of you was entirely manufactured, triggered specifically by your resemblance to your father. Harry sat back, stunned. Manufactured? But why? Control, McGonagall said simply. Albus needed you isolated, dependent on him for guidance and approval. He needed you desperate for positive connection, willing to do anything to protect the few friendships you were permitted. Permitted, Harry repeated bitterly. My whole life's been a lie, hasn't it? McGonagall leaned forward, her eyes fierce. Not all of it, Harry. The enchantments could direct your behavior and influence your feelings, but they couldn't create your fundamental character. Your courage, your compassion, your remarkable capacity for love, those are yours alone. Harry wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at him. How could he know which parts of himself were real and which were Dumbledore's creations? There's something else you should know, McGonagall continued after a pause. About your living situation. The Dursleys, Harry said flatly. Let me guess, there were never any blood wards protecting me there, were there? McGonagall's eyebrows rose. How did you? It's obvious now, Harry interrupted. If Dumbledore was willing to put 34 spells on me to control my behavior, why would he need blood wards to keep me at the Dursleys? He could just make me accept it, make me never question it, make me grateful for even the smallest kindnesses when I returned to Hogwarts. McGonagall nodded slowly. The alleged blood protection was indeed fabricated. There were wards, but they were designed to suppress your magic and reinforce the compulsions placed upon you, not to protect you from external threats. And the Dursleys? Were they under compulsions too? Yes. Their natural discomfort with magic was amplified to outright hatred. Vernon Dursley had 7 compulsions, Petunia had 12, and their son had 4. Harry laughed hollowly. So they might not have actually hated me all this time. Their treatment of you was inexcusable regardless, McGonagall said firmly. But the evaluation team believes they were magically influenced to treat you far worse than they might have naturally. Harry processed this information silently. It should have brought some comfort, knowing his relatives hadn't entirely chosen their cruelty, but mostly he just felt numb. What happens now? He finally asked. With Dumbledore gone, what changes? Everything, McGonagall replied simply. The Board of Governors has appointed me acting headmistress while they conduct a full investigation. The DMLE has issued a warrant for Albus's arrest. And as for you? She hesitated. You need never return to Privet Drive. Harry's head snapped up. What? Your godfather, Sirius Black, was another victim of Albus's machinations. He never received a trial after your parents' deaths. Evidence has emerged suggesting he was innocent of the crimes for which he was imprisoned. Sirius Black. The escaped murderer who's supposedly hunting me? The very same, though the murderer and hunting you parts appear to be fabrications. The Ministry is now frantically searching for him to offer a formal exoneration. Harry struggled to absorb this latest revelation. So if he's found and cleared, I could live with him. That is his right as your godfather, yes. McGonagall's expression softened. He loved you very much, Harry. When you were a baby, he was as much a parent to you as James and Lily. Something warm flickered in Harry's chest, hope, perhaps, or the first tentative roots of connection to his past. Until then, McGonagall continued, you'll remain at Hogwarts. The enchantments affecting you are being carefully removed by Healer Brightwood and her team, but it must be done gradually to prevent magical shock. Will I? Harry hesitated, uncertain how to phrase his question. Will I be different? When they're all gone? McGonagall considered him thoughtfully. Different, yes, but still yourself. Your core personality will remain, but you may discover new interests, abilities, and aspects of your character that were previously suppressed. The healers call it personality expansion rather than change. Harry nodded, finding the distinction important somehow. For instance, McGonagall continued with the ghost of a smile, you might discover you have an aptitude for subjects beyond defense against the dark arts. Several of the enchantments on you specifically limited your academic performance in potions, transfiguration, and other disciplines. Why would Dumbledore want me to do poorly in school? Control, again, McGonagall sighed. An academically exceptional Harry Potter might have attracted different friends, different mentors. Might have grown more independent, less reliant on Albus for guidance and approval. Harry thought of Hermione, of how teachers favored her, how Dumbledore had always shown special attention to her ideas. He let Hermione excel, though. Within parameters. Miss Granger's enchantments directed her intelligence toward book knowledge rather than creative thinking, and reinforced her tendency to rely on published authority. She was permitted academic success because it served Albus's purposes, giving you access to necessary information while maintaining his control structure. The calculation of it all made Harry's skin crawl. And Ron. Mr. Weasley's enchantments encouraged laziness and jealousy while suppressing his considerable strategic abilities. He was designed to be your loyal friend but never to outshine you or encourage you toward greater achievement. Harry stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. It's all so planned. My whole life, planned out by someone else. Yes, McGonagall said simply. But that plan has now failed, Harry. Your life is your own again, or it will be, once your healing is complete. The Gryffindor common room felt strange, the usual boisterous energy replaced by subdued conversations and suspicious glances. News of widespread compulsions had shattered the easy trust that normally existed between housemates. Who had been enchanted to befriend whom? Whose rivalries were natural and whose had been manufactured? Harry entered cautiously, immediately spotting Ron and Hermione sitting apart from the others near the fireplace. Both looked up as he approached, their expressions guarded. Hey, Harry said awkwardly, taking the armchair opposite them. Hey yourself, Ron replied, his voice rough. He looked pale, freckles standing out starkly against his skin. They tell you about the money? Harry nodded. It wasn't your fault, Ron. Your parents didn't even know. Doesn't make it right, Ron muttered. All this time, thinking we were friends, and it was all just, it wasn't all just anything, Hermione interrupted fiercely. The compulsions influenced us, but they didn't create our friendship from nothing. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and Harry noticed she wasn't carrying any books, something so fundamentally un-Hermione-like that it unsettled him. 17 compulsions, she said, catching his gaze. 17. Including one that made me physically uncomfortable if I went more than a few hours without reading something academic. She laughed bitterly. Did you know I used to love fiction before Hogwarts? Fantasy novels, mysteries, adventure stories. Then suddenly it was all textbooks and magical theory, and anything else felt like a waste of time. I didn't know that, Harry admitted. Neither did I, she said quietly. Not really. Not until they started removing the enchantments. Ron leaned forward. What about you, Harry? You feeling different yet? Harry considered the question. Yeah, but it's hard to explain. Like parts of me that were always foggy are becoming clearer. I'm angry a lot, at Dumbledore, at the situation, but it's a clean kind of angry, if that makes sense. Not the confused, guilty anger I used to feel. Hermione nodded. The healers say that's normal. Our authentic emotions were being suppressed or redirected. They also said we might start remembering things differently, Ron added. Memories that were modified or blocked. Already happening, Harry confirmed. I keep remembering bits of first year differently, like when we went after the Philosopher's Stone. I remember now that I actually suggested telling McGonagall more strongly, but every time I brought it up, Ron would suddenly change the subject and Hermione would remind me that adults never helped. Ron flushed. I don't even remember doing that, but they found a specific trigger in my compulsions to distract you whenever you wanted to seek help from anyone but Dumbledore. And I had one to reinforce the idea that all authority figures except Dumbledore would eventually fail you, Hermione added quietly. It's horrible, thinking how easily we were used. They fell silent, the gravity of their manipulation settling heavily between them. So what happens now? Ron finally asked. To us, I mean. If our friendship was built on compulsions. We build something real, Harry said firmly. If we want to. Without the manipulations. Hermione's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that. To see who we really are, together and separately. Same, Ron nodded. Though fair warning, I might turn out to be a completely different person once all 12 compulsions are gone. Harry smiled slightly. I've got 34. I'll probably end up unrecognizable. Good, Hermione declared. I want to meet the real Harry Potter. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the portrait hole. Fred and George Weasley climbed through, looking thunderous, an expression so at odds with their usual mischievous demeanor that several nearby first-years shrank back in alarm. Ron, Fred called, spotting them by the fire. Just got our results. How bad? Ron asked as the twins approached. 9 each, George answered grimly. Identical compulsions, cast simultaneously. The bastard made sure we'd never take anything seriously, Fred continued. Specific blocks against excelling academically, against considering certain career paths, against noticing suspicious behavior from professors, George added. And guess who had the heaviest compulsions of anyone in our family? Who? Hermione asked. Percy, the twins said in unison. Ron's eyebrows shot up. Percy. But he's the most rule-following, authority-loving, exactly, Fred interrupted. 23 compulsions, Ron. More than the rest of us combined. They think his natural personality is almost the opposite of what we've always known. The healers said his case is one of the most severe examples of complete personality overriding they've ever seen, George explained. He's been taken to St. Mungo's for intensive treatment. Harry felt sick. Percy had always seemed so naturally pompous and rule-abiding that the idea of it being an artificial personality was deeply disturbing. What about Ginny? Ron asked hesitantly. The twins exchanged dark looks. 15 compulsions, Fred finally said. Including a strong artificial romantic fixation. On Harry, George clarified unnecessarily. Triggered to activate when she first saw him at King's Cross before your first year. Harry's stomach lurched. She was compelled to have feelings for me. That's sick, Ron finished, looking green. That's bloody sick. She's with the mind healers now, Fred said. Having a rough time of it, but they say she'll recover. The portrait hole opened again, admitting Professor McGonagall. The common room fell silent as she surveyed them all with tired eyes. I have updates, she announced. First, Professor Lupin has been confirmed as another victim of Headmaster Dumbledore's manipulations. He had 14 separate enchantments, including memory modifications regarding your parents, Mr. Potter. Harry sat up straighter. Lupin knew my parents? He was one of their closest friends at Hogwarts, McGonagall confirmed. Along with Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew. The memory modifications were designed to prevent him from forming too close a bond with you or sharing information about your family. Another connection to his past, deliberately severed by Dumbledore. Harry's anger burned hotter. Second, McGonagall continued, we've discovered a pattern in the enchantments placed on students. Those with the highest magical potential received the most numerous and restrictive compulsions. Neville, who had been sitting quietly nearby, looked up sharply. That's why some of us had more than others. Precisely, Mr. Longbottom. You, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, and a handful of others were subjected to the most extensive controls because you posed the greatest potential threat to Albus's plans. What plans, exactly? Hermione asked. What was all this for? McGonagall hesitated. That remains unclear. However, evidence suggests Albus has been implementing this system of control for nearly 50 years, beginning shortly after his defeat of Grindelwald. Murmurs spread through the common room at this revelation. Finally, McGonagall said, raising her voice slightly, I must inform you that the DMLE has expanded its investigation beyond Hogwarts. They now believe Albus's influence extended to the ministry itself, including senior officials and members of the Wisengamot. The entire government, someone gasped. Potentially, McGonagall confirmed grimly. Which is why security at Hogwarts has been significantly enhanced. Until Albus is apprehended, we must assume he may attempt to regain control of the situation, and of certain key individuals. Her eyes lingered on Harry, and he knew without asking that he was at the top of Dumbledore's list. Whatever the old wizard's grand plan had been, Harry had clearly been central to it. Rest assured, McGonagall finished, that your safety is our primary concern. Now, I suggest you all get some sleep. The mind healers will continue their work tomorrow, and classes will resume on a modified schedule the day after. As she left, the common room erupted into frenzied discussion. Harry, however, found himself exhausted beyond words. He stood, mumbling goodnight to Ron and Hermione, and headed for the dormitory stairs. Harry, Hermione called after him, it will get better. Once the healing is complete. He nodded, grateful for her optimism but unable to share it yet. His entire identity had been constructed by someone else. How could he possibly know who he really was beneath all those layers of manipulation? Harry woke gasping, fragments of dreams clinging to his consciousness, unfamiliar memories of people and places he'd never seen. No, not never seen, forgotten. The mind healers had warned him this might happen as the memory modifications dissolved, dreams vivid with returning memories. Moonlight streamed through the dormitory window, illuminating the empty beds around him. Ron was at St. Mungo's overnight for a particularly complex enchantment removal, and Neville had gone too, for additional testing. Harry reached for his glasses, then paused, blinking in confusion. The room wasn't blurry. He could see perfectly, the detailed pattern on Dean's West Ham poster, the tiny lettering on Seamus's trunk, even the dust motes floating in the moonbeams. What the? He scrambled out of bed and to the mirror on the wardrobe door. His reflection stared back, startlingly clear without the familiar round glasses. His eyes seemed brighter somehow, more intensely green. Mr. Potter. Healer Brightwood stood in the dormitory doorway, her wand illuminating her concerned expression. The monitoring charms alerted me to a significant magical shift. My eyes, Harry said, turning to her. I can see without my glasses. Brightwood approached, casting diagnostic charms. Ah, she nodded, studying the glowing symbols that appeared. We've just dissolved a particularly complex visual impairment enchantment. It was linked to several others, including a physical resemblance enhancement. A what? An enchantment designed to make you resemble your father more strongly than you naturally would, she explained. Albus appears to have deliberately impaired your vision and then provided glasses in the exact style your father wore, creating a stronger visual connection between you. Harry turned back to the mirror, studying his face with new eyes. So I don't actually look like my dad. You do resemble him, he was your father, after all. But the resemblance was magically exaggerated, particularly in features most visible to casual observers. She gestured to his hair. The perpetual messiness, for instance, was enchanted. Your natural hair is likely more manageable, though we won't know exactly how until all the physical appearance enchantments are removed. Harry ran a hand through his hair, still messy for now, but knowing it wasn't naturally so felt strangely significant. Another piece of his constructed identity. Why would Dumbledore want me to look more like my father, he asked. Brightwood sighed. Based on the pattern of enchantments we've uncovered, it appears to have been part of a broader strategy to keep you firmly connected to your father's legacy while simultaneously isolating you from deeper knowledge about your family. The visual resemblance prompted constant comments about how much you look like James, but the memory blocks prevented anyone from sharing meaningful information about what kind of person he actually was. The manipulation was so thorough, so carefully calculated, that Harry felt a fresh wave of anger. So everyone telling me, you look just like your father but with your mother's eyes. Was seeing an artificially enhanced resemblance, yes, Brightwood confirmed. Though your eyes are indeed very similar to your mother's, that particular feature doesn't appear to have been modified. Harry turned away from the mirror, unable to look at his reflection any longer. What else will change? As the enchantments are removed? It's difficult to predict precisely, she admitted. The physical changes will likely be subtle, your natural appearance isn't dramatically different from what you see now. The cognitive and magical changes, however, may be more significant. Magical changes? Brightwood nodded. Several of the enchantments were specifically designed to restrict your magical abilities. As they're removed, you may experience substantial increases in power and control. Is that why I can suddenly see without glasses? Magic fixing my eyes? No, your eyes were never physically damaged. The enchantment created an artificial myopia by affecting how your brain processed visual information. Once removed, your natural perfect vision was simply uncovered. Harry absorbed this, thinking of all the times his poor eyesight had put him at a disadvantage, in classes, in Quidditch, in dangerous situations. All deliberately engineered by someone he'd trusted. You should try to get some more sleep, Brightwood suggested gently. Tomorrow will bring more changes as we continue the removal process, and you'll need your strength. After she left, Harry lay awake for a long time, staring at the canopy above his bed with his unnaturally perfect vision. Who was he, really? How much of Harry Potter was genuine, and how much was Dumbledore's creation? As he finally drifted back to sleep, one thought surfaced with perfect clarity: whoever he truly was, he was determined to find out. Morning brought chaos to Hogwarts. Harry entered the Great Hall to find it buzzing with tension and excitement. At the Slytherin table, the usual hierarchy had been utterly disrupted. Draco Malfoy sat alone, looking shell-shocked, while Crabbe and Goyle were deep in conversation with a group of younger students. Malfoy had 21 compulsions, Hermione informed Harry as he sat beside her at the Gryffindor table. Specifically designed to make him antagonize you and exhibit the worst pureblood stereotypes. Harry stared across the hall at his longtime rival. Why would Dumbledore want that? To reinforce your negative view of Slytherin House, she explained. To ensure you'd reject any possibility of association with them. Harry remembered the Sorting Hat's insistence that he would do well in Slytherin, and how Hagrid and Ron had both primed him to fear and despise the house before he'd even arrived at Hogwarts. Was Hagrid under compulsions too? He asked suddenly. Hermione nodded grimly. 19. Many specifically related to how he interacted with you, what information to share, what to withhold, how to portray certain people and houses. And the Sorting Hat? The Hat wanted to put me in Slytherin, but I begged it not to because of everything I'd heard. The Hat wasn't enchanted, it can't be, but you were. One of your compulsions was specifically triggered to activate when the Hat mentioned Slytherin, causing you to feel intense aversion. The scope of Dumbledore's manipulations was dizzying. Every significant choice Harry had made, every relationship he'd formed, had been influenced or outright controlled. His thoughts were interrupted by Neville, who slid onto the bench opposite them. Like Harry, Neville looked subtly different this morning, his posture straighter, his movements more assured. "They've finished removing my blocks," he announced without preamble. "The magical suppression ones." "And?" Hermione prompted. In answer, Neville held out his hand. A small flame appeared above his palm, dancing and shifting into the shape of a tiny lion before dissolving into sparks. "Wandless magic," Harry breathed. "Apparently I've had the aptitude all along," Neville said, his voice a mixture of wonder and simmering anger. "My core magic is actually specialized in elemental manipulation. The healers say it's quite rare." "That's incredible, Neville," Hermione said earnestly. "It's infuriating," he corrected her. "I spent years thinking I was barely magical, enduring my family's disappointment, when all along." He broke off, shaking his head. "What about you two? Any new discoveries this morning?" "Perfect vision," Harry replied. "No more glasses. And apparently my hair isn't naturally untamable, that was a compulsion to make me look more like my dad." "I've discovered I can read ancient runes fluently," Hermione offered. "I thought I was just starting to learn it this year, but apparently I'd already mastered the basics before Hogwarts and was compelled to forget." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of the morning mail. Hundreds of owls swooped into the great hall, many carrying copies of the Daily Prophet. The front page headline was visible even from a distance: "Dumbledore's Deception, 48-year control scheme exposed." Hermione snatched a copy from a nearby delivery owl, spreading it out on the table between them. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. "In a shocking development that has rocked the wizarding world, Albus Dumbledore, long revered as the greatest wizard of the modern era, stands accused of implementing an unprecedented scheme of magical control spanning nearly 5 decades. The scandal erupted when Hogwarts student Harry Potter was subjected to a routine medical scan following a Dementor attack, revealing 34 separate loyalty and behavioral modification enchantments placed upon him. Subsequent investigation has uncovered a vast web of manipulation extending far beyond Hogwarts walls. According to sources within the DMLE, Dumbledore's scheme may have affected hundreds, perhaps thousands of witches and wizards, including high-ranking ministry officials, Wisengamot members, and international magical dignitaries. "We're looking at potentially the largest case of magical manipulation in recorded history," said Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. "The investigation is ongoing, but preliminary findings suggest Dumbledore began implementing this system shortly after his defeat of Gellert Grindelwald in 1945. Most disturbing are indications that Dumbledore's manipulations may have influenced the course of the last Wizarding War, including circumstances surrounding the deaths of James and Lily Potter and the subsequent disappearance of He Who Must Not Be Named." Hermione continued reading, but Harry had stopped listening. A cold weight settled in his stomach as a terrible suspicion formed. Had Dumbledore somehow engineered his parents' deaths? Had the old wizard deliberately created the boy who lived as part of his grand scheme? "Harry?" Hermione's concerned voice broke through his thoughts. "I'm fine," he said automatically, though he was anything but. "Just processing." Before she could respond, Professor McGonagall approached their table. "Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, Mr. Longbottom, please come with me. There have been developments you should be aware of." They followed her from the hall, conscious of the stairs tracking their movement. McGonagall led them not to her office but to the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey and Healer Brightwood stood conversing in low voices at the far end. "We've had a breakthrough in understanding Albus's larger scheme," McGonagall explained as they walked. "It concerns all 3 of you, though Mr. Potter most directly." In the hospital wing, they found Ron already waiting, along with the twins and, surprisingly, Luna Lovegood from Ravenclaw. Miss Lovegood's analysis proved remarkably insightful, McGonagall explained, noticing Harry's questioning look. She was able to identify patterns in the compulsion structures that our experts had missed. Luna smiled dreamily. "The Nargles helped." they're particularly good at spotting hidden connections. Rather than dismissing this as nonsense, as Harry might have expected, McGonagall nodded seriously. Indeed. What Miss Lovegood refers to as nargles appears to be a manifestation of a rare magical talent for pattern recognition. Another ability Dumbledore suppressed? Hermione guessed. Precisely, Healer Brightwood confirmed. Miss Lovegood had 14 compulsions, several designed to make her present her insights in terms of non-existent creatures, ensuring she wouldn't be taken seriously. Luna's perpetual dreaminess suddenly appeared in a new light, not natural eccentricity but imposed obfuscation, forcing her to express her genuine perceptions in ways others would dismiss. So what's this breakthrough? Harry asked, bringing them back to the matter at hand. Madame Pomfrey unrolled a large parchment on the nearby table. It appeared to be a complex magical diagram, with dozens of interconnected lines forming an intricate web. This is a visualization of Albus's control network, she explained. Each node represents an individual under his influence, with the lines showing the connections between them. Harry leaned closer, noting that one node at the center was larger than the others, glowing with a faint green light. That's me, isn't it? Yes, Brightwood confirmed. You were the focal point of his entire scheme, Mr. Potter. But not for the reason we initially assumed. What do you mean? We believed Albus was controlling you to use as a weapon against Voldemort, McGonagall said bluntly. A child hero he could shape and direct according to his own strategy. That's not it? Ron asked, looking confused. It's far more complex, Luna answered, her usually dreamy voice suddenly precise. Headmaster Dumbledore wasn't preparing Harry to fight Voldemort. He was preventing Harry from becoming Voldemort. A stunned silence followed this pronouncement. That's absurd, Hermione finally sputtered. Harry would never, not willingly, no, Brightwood interjected. But according to our analysis of the compulsion patterns and Albus's private notes, he believed Mr. Potter and Voldemort were magically linked in some fundamental way. He feared that without his careful control, Mr. Potter might eventually be influenced or even possessed by Voldemort's consciousness. Harry's hand unconsciously rose to his scar. Because of this? Because of what happened when he tried to kill me? Partly, McGonagall said. But Albus's concerns predated your birth. He had been monitoring both the Potter and Riddle bloodlines for generations, believing they shared a dangerous magical resonance. Riddle? Harry repeated. Who's Riddle? The adults exchanged glances. Tom Marvolo Riddle, Pomfrey finally said. Voldemort's birth name. Another piece of information that had been kept from him. Harry's frustration mounted. So Dumbledore thought I'd turn into Voldemort if he didn't control every aspect of my life? Not exactly, Luna corrected. He believed your natural magical affinity and abilities were dangerously similar to Riddle's. The compulsions were designed to suppress those similarities and emphasize traits Dumbledore considered safer. Like what? Neville asked. Mr. Potter's natural magical affinities include Parseltongue, wandless magic, an aptitude for the mind arts, and exceptional talent in both defensive and offensive magic, Brightwood listed. All abilities shared by Tom Riddle. The compulsion suppressed these abilities while enhancing traits like self-sacrifice, distrust of ambition, and reluctance to claim personal power, McGonagall added. Albus was attempting to create a Harry Potter who was the antithesis of Tom Riddle in personality and values, even if their innate magical signatures were similar. Harry felt sick. His entire personality had been engineered to counterbalance a man he'd never even met. So the real me, the me without the compulsions, am I actually like Voldemort? No, Luna said firmly, surprising them all with her vehemence. Having similar magical abilities doesn't make you similar people. Dumbledore's fear blinded him to that simple truth. Miss Lovegood is correct, McGonagall agreed. Albus's approach was fundamentally flawed. He believed magical affinity determined character, when all evidence suggests otherwise. Besides, Ron added unexpectedly, even if you did have some of the same talents as you know who, so what? It's how you use them that matters, right? Harry gave his friend a grateful look, some of his anxiety easing. Right. So what does this mean for the removal process? Are some of these compulsions actually necessary to prevent? I don't know, Voldemort taking over my mind or something? Absolutely not, Brightwood said firmly. While your scar does contain some unusual magic that we're still analyzing, there is no evidence that removing Albus's compulsions will make you vulnerable to outside influence. Quite the contrary, your natural mental defenses appear to have been suppressed by these very enchantments. In fact, Pomfrey added, the compulsions themselves represented a far greater vulnerability. They created artificial pathways into your mind that could potentially be exploited. By Dumbledore, Harry realized. He built himself back doors into my head. Precisely, McGonagall confirmed grimly. Which is why completing the removal process as quickly as safely possible has become our highest priority. The next several days passed in a blur of healing sessions and startling discoveries. Each removed compulsion revealed new aspects of Harry's true self, abilities, preferences, and personality traits that had been deliberately suppressed. He discovered a natural aptitude for wandless magic that rivaled Neville's, though his manifested differently, focusing on shields and protective enchantments rather than elemental manipulation. His Parseltongue ability, rather than being a dark gift from Voldemort as Dumbledore had implied, was actually a rare Potter family trait that appeared every few generations. Most surprising was his suddenly transformed relationship with magic itself. Where spellcasting had previously felt like forcing his will through a narrow channel, it now flowed naturally, responding to his intentions with minimal effort. It's like I've been trying to write with my left hand all this time, he explained to Ron and Hermione as they practiced in an empty classroom. And now I've switched to my right and everything just works. To demonstrate, he effortlessly conjured a flock of bluebirds similar to ones Hermione had spent weeks perfecting the previous year. They circled the room once before dissolving into sparkling mist. That's a sixth-year conjuration, Hermione noted, looking impressed. And you did it wandlessly. Harry shrugged, still uncomfortable with his newfound abilities. It felt like cheating somehow, accessing skills he hadn't earned through proper study and practice. The healers say you're not actually learning these spells now, Ron reminded him, sensing his discomfort. You're just accessing knowledge and abilities you already had but were blocked from using. I know, Harry sighed. It's just strange. Sometimes I don't feel like me anymore. That's because you're finally becoming you, Hermione said gently. The real you, not Dumbledore's carefully constructed version. Ron, who had completed his own compulsion removal the day before, nodded in agreement. It's disorienting at first. I keep having moments where I suddenly realize I actually enjoy things I thought I hated, like studying ancient runes. Apparently, I have a natural knack for translation magic that was suppressed. And I'm discovering I have strong opinions about magical theory that weren't there before, Hermione added. Or rather, they were there but buried under compulsions to accept established academic consensus without question. Their conversation was interrupted by a silver tabby cat, McGonagall's Patronus, leaping through the wall. Mr. Potter, it spoke in McGonagall's voice. Please come to the hospital wing immediately. We've had a development regarding your scar. Harry exchanged concerned glances with his friends. You think they've found something bad? Only one way to find out, Ron said, standing. We're coming with you. They found not only McGonagall waiting in the hospital wing, but also Bill Weasley, whom Harry had met briefly at the Quidditch World Cup. With them was a severe-looking goblin in formal attire. Mr. Potter, McGonagall greeted him. Thank you for coming promptly. Allow me to introduce Cursebreaker William Weasley and Master Nagnock, Chief Healer of Gringotts. Harry shook hands with both, noting the goblin's assessing gaze. We've asked for their assistance with your scar, McGonagall explained. Madame Pomfrey's diagnostic spells detected something unusual that requires specialized expertise. Unusual how? Harry asked warily. Bill stepped forward. Based on the preliminary scans, your scar contains a magical fragment that doesn't belong to you. We believe it may be a soul fragment. Harry's blood ran cold. A what? A piece of another wizard's soul, the goblin clarified, his voice gravelly. Specifically, we believe it to be a fragment of Voldemort's soul, embedded in your scar the night he attacked you. The hospital wing seemed to tilt around Harry. I have a piece of Voldemort's soul in my head, he whispered. We believe so, Bill confirmed. It's a type of very dark magic called a Horcrux, or at least, it's similar to one. What's a Horcrux? A container for a soul fragment, created through murder, Nagnok explained bluntly. A wizard seeking immortality might create one deliberately, but the fragment in your scar appears to have been created accidentally. When Voldemort tried to kill me, Harry surmised. Precisely, McGonagall said. The working theory is that Voldemort's soul was already unstable from previous Horcrux creation. When the killing curse rebounded, a fragment broke off and attached to the only living thing present, you. Harry felt ill. So I've been carrying a piece of Voldemort around for 12 years? Yes, Bill said. And we believe Dumbledore knew about it. In fact, many of the compulsions placed on you appear designed to prevent the soul fragment from influencing your behavior. Can you remove it? Harry asked desperately. That is why we are here, Nagnok confirmed. Goblins have extensive experience with soul magic, particularly its removal from objects not designed to house it. The procedure is complex but well established, Bill added reassuringly. We've performed similar extractions on cursed artifacts. Harry swallowed hard. Will it hurt? You will be unconscious throughout, Nagnok assured him. There may be some discomfort during recovery, but nothing unmanageable. And you're sure it's safe? As safe as such a procedure can be, McGonagall said honestly. There are risks, but leaving the fragment in place poses greater dangers, particularly now that the compulsions containing it have been removed. Harry nodded slowly. When would we do this? Now, if you consent, Nagnok replied. Time is of the essence. The fragment has already begun to stir since the compulsions were lifted. That explained the increased frequency of his nightmares and the occasional flashes of alien emotion he'd been experiencing. Harry took a deep breath. Let's do it. The procedure was prepared with efficient precision. Harry was positioned on a specially prepared bed, surrounded by complex runic circles drawn in what appeared to be silver and goblin blood. Bill and Nagnok worked together, chanting in gobbledygook while tracing intricate patterns with their wands and fingers. As promised, Harry was rendered unconscious before the actual extraction began. He drifted in darkness, occasionally catching glimpses of memories that didn't belong to him, a towering castle he'd never seen, a forbidden forest unlike Hogwarts' own, a chamber deep underground where something precious was hidden. Then came pain, searing, white-hot agony centered on his scar. He tried to scream but couldn't find his voice. The pain intensified, building to an impossible crescendo, and then, silence. Blessed emptiness. The foreign presence that Harry had never consciously recognized until its absence was gone. When he awoke, the hospital wing was dimly lit, suggesting several hours had passed. His head throbbed dully, but beneath the pain was a profound sense of lightness, as though a weight he'd carried his entire life had finally been lifted. Harry. Hermione's anxious face appeared above him. How do you feel? Different, he managed, his voice hoarse. Good different. Empty, but in a good way. The extraction was successful, came Bill's tired voice from nearby. Complete removal with no soul damage to the host. Host. The clinical term sent a shiver through Harry. That's what he'd been, a host for a parasite, carrying a piece of his parents' murderer inside him. There's more, McGonagall said, moving into Harry's field of vision. Master Nagnok detected traces of the same magic elsewhere, 6 additional locations where similar soul fragments might exist. Other Horcruxes, Bill clarified. Deliberate ones. If they all belong to Voldemort, then he can't truly die until they're all destroyed, Harry concluded, the implications sinking in. That's how he survived when the killing curse rebounded. We believe so, McGonagall confirmed. And we suspect Albus has been aware of this for some time. The diary, Harry said suddenly, remembering the events of his second year. Tom Riddle's diary that possessed Ginny. That was one of them, wasn't it? Almost certainly, Bill agreed. From Ginny's description, it contained consciousness and will, hallmarks of a Horcrux. So there are 5 more out there somewhere, Harry sighed. And we have to find and destroy them before Voldemort can come back completely. We, McGonagall repeated, raising an eyebrow. Mr. Potter, while I appreciate your sense of responsibility, this task need not fall to you. You are 13 years old. Almost 14, Harry corrected automatically. And it doesn't matter. Voldemort has been after me specifically since I was a baby. This is my fight. No, came a new voice from the doorway. It's our fight. Sirius Black stood there, gaunt and unkempt but unmistakably alive and free. Behind him was Professor Lupin, looking more robust than Harry had ever seen him, his typically shabby clothes replaced with new robes. Sirius, Harry breathed, struggling to sit up. You're here. Wild hippogriffs couldn't keep me away, kiddo. Sirius crossed the room in long strides, embracing Harry carefully. Especially after hearing what that manipulative old goat did to you. Harry returned the hug awkwardly, unused to such open affection. How are you here? The Ministry, cleared of all charges as of this morning, Sirius grinned. Emergency session of the Wisengamot, overseen by Amelia Bones herself. Peter Pettigrew has been officially declared alive and wanted for questioning. And the DMLE has issued a formal apology for 12 years of wrongful imprisonment, Lupin added, joining them. Along with rather substantial financial compensation. None of which matters compared to finally being able to be here for you, Sirius said, his expression growing serious. Harry, I've failed you for 12 years. I won't fail you again. Something warm unfurled in Harry's chest, an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. After a moment, he recognized it, belonging. Family. So what now? He asked, looking around at the gathered faces, Sirius and Lupin, McGonagall, Bill, Ron and Hermione. Now you rest and recover, McGonagall said firmly. The soul fragment extraction was taxing on your magic and body. Everything else can wait. And after that? Harry pressed. Sirius squeezed his shoulder. After that, we take things one step at a time. Finding the remaining Horcruxes, tracking down Dumbledore, rebuilding what he destroyed, none of it happens overnight. But it does happen, Lupin added. Together. Harry nodded, suddenly exhausted but more at peace than he could ever remember feeling. For the first time in his life, he was truly himself, no compulsions, no soul fragment, no manipulations shaping his thoughts and feelings. Just Harry Potter, whoever that turned out to be. Together, he agreed, letting his eyes drift closed. I think I'd like that. Chapter 2, The Web Unravels. The Great Hall had been transformed. Where house tables once stood in neat rows, dozens of curtained alcoves now lined the walls, each containing a healer, a patient, and the complex diagnostic equipment required to detect and remove magical compulsions. The constant murmur of diagnostic spells created an eerie background hum, punctuated occasionally by gasps or sobs as another person discovered the extent of their manipulation. Harry sat cross-legged on his bed in the hospital wing, eyes closed in concentration. The removal of Voldemort's soul fragment had left him physically drained but magically rejuvenated. With each passing hour, he discovered new aspects of his power that had previously been suppressed. Focus on your magical core, Healer Brightwood instructed from nearby. Visualize it as a source of light within you. Harry took a deep breath, turning his attention inward. Unlike previous attempts at meditation, which had always felt forced and futile, he now slipped easily into a state of heightened awareness. His magic appeared in his mind's eye as a brilliant sphere of emerald energy, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "I can see it," he murmured. "Good. Now, reach for a small thread of that power. Direct it outward, through your hand." Harry extended his palm, drawing a tendril of energy from his core and channeling it down his arm. The magic responded eagerly, almost joyfully, flowing through him like a familiar friend finally recognized. "Excellent," Brightwood approved. "Now shape it according to your intention." Harry pictured a simple shield charm, visualizing the protective barrier taking form. A translucent dome of shimmering energy materialized around him, rippling with emerald and gold highlights. "Remarkable," Brightwood murmured, making notes on her parchment. "Wandless shielding at this level is typically mastered by 7th years, if at all." "It feels natural," Harry admitted, letting the shield dissolve. "Like I've always known how to do it but somehow kept forgetting." That's precisely what was happening. The compulsions forced your conscious mind to forget these abilities each time they naturally surfaced. The hospital wing doors opened, admitting Sirius and Lupin. Both had undergone intensive treatment to remove their own compulsions, 26 for Sirius and 14 for Lupin. The changes were striking. Sirius moved with the fluid grace of a duelist rather than the cautious shuffle of an escaped prisoner, while Lupin carried himself with newfound confidence, his characteristic hesitation replaced by quiet assurance. "How's the training going?" Sirius asked, dropping into the chair beside Harry's bed. "Your godson has remarkable aptitude," Brightwood replied before Harry could answer. "Particularly in defensive magic. His shields are already approaching Auror standard." Sirius beamed with pride. "James would be over the moon. The Potter line has always produced exceptional shielding specialists, it's in your magical heritage." "Really?" Harry perked up. "No one ever told me that." "Not surprising," Lupin said grimly. "Most of my memories about your family's magical talents were blocked or modified. I'm still recovering new ones daily." "Speaking of recovery," Sirius segued, "we've just come from the Great Hall. The testing is nearly complete, and the results are... well, staggering doesn't quite cover it." "How bad?" Harry asked. "Out of 286 students currently at Hogwarts, 273 had at least one compulsion," Lupin reported. "The average was 7 per student, with higher numbers among those showing unusual magical ability or leadership potential." "And the professors?" "Every single one," Sirius confirmed. McGonagall had 8, Flitwick had 12, Sprout had 6. "Snape." He hesitated, old animosity briefly flashing across his features before he visibly set it aside. "Snape had 29, second only to you." "Why so many on Snape?" Harry wondered. "Because he was close to your mother," Lupin explained quietly. "And because he possessed extraordinary magical talent that Albus needed to control." Harry absorbed this, adding it to his evolving understanding of the potion's master. The man who had terrorized him for 2 years was as much a victim of Dumbledore's manipulations as Harry himself. "How is he?" Harry asked, surprising himself with his genuine concern. "Still at St. Mungo's," Sirius replied. "The healers say his case is exceptionally complex. Many of his compulsions were layered and interlocked, creating an artificial personality overlaid on his natural character. Like 2 people in one body," Lupin added. "The bitter, vindictive Snape we've known was largely Albus's creation." The hospital wing doors opened again, this time admitting Hermione and Ron. Both looked different in subtle ways, Hermione's posture less rigid, Ron's movements more deliberate. "We've just finished our session in the Great Hall," Hermione announced, dropping a thick folder on the foot of Harry's bed. "And I've been compiling data on the patterns we're seeing." "Of course you have," Ron said, but his tone held affectionate amusement rather than the exasperation that might once have colored such a comment. "What have you found?" Lupin asked, leaning forward with interest. Hermione opened the folder, revealing charts and diagrams meticulously annotated in her neat handwriting. The compulsions follow distinct patterns based on house affiliation, blood status, and magical ability. Slytherins were compelled toward overt bigotry and antagonism, Ravenclaws toward book knowledge over practical application, Hufflepuffs toward passivity, and Gryffindors toward recklessness. Ensuring house divisions remain strong, Sirius noted. Preventing natural alliances that might have formed otherwise. Exactly, Hermione confirmed. But it goes deeper than that. Look at these family patterns. She pointed to another chart. Certain bloodlines were targeted more heavily than others, particularly those with historical political influence or unusual magical gifts. The Longbottoms, Harry noted, scanning the chart. The Boneses, the Lovegoods, the Greengrasses. And the Blacks, Sirius added grimly. My entire family was under heavy compulsion for generations. It explains a lot about our infamous madness and extremism. The question is why, Lupin mused. What was Albus trying to achieve with such extensive control? I think I know, came a dreamy voice from the doorway. Luna Lovegood drifted into the hospital wing, her silvery eyes sharper and more focused than Harry had ever seen them. He was preventing another Dark Lord from rising, or rather, preventing anyone from becoming powerful enough to challenge him. Miss Lovegood, Healer Brightwood acknowledged with a respectful nod. Your insight on the compulsion patterns has been invaluable. Luna smiled faintly. The Nargles are much clearer now that the mist has been lifted. I can see the connections properly. Harry had learned that Luna's talk of magical creatures was her mind's way of conceptualizing magical patterns and energies that most wizards couldn't perceive, a rare talent called magical synesthesia that Dumbledore had deliberately obfuscated through compulsions. What connections are you seeing now? Hermione asked, with none of the skepticism she might once have shown. Luna approached the bed, gesturing for Hermione's charts. May I? Hermione handed them over, and Luna spread the papers across Harry's blanket, rearranging them in a pattern that made sense only to her. It started with Grindelwald, she said, tapping a blank space in the center of her arrangement. After Dumbledore defeated him in 1945, he didn't just win a duel, he absorbed something from him. Absorbed something? Sirius repeated. Like what? Knowledge. Power. A vision. Luna's fingers traced invisible patterns between the charts. Grindelwald's vision of the greater good didn't die with his defeat. It transformed in Dumbledore. You're suggesting Albus adopted Grindelwald's goals? Lupin looked skeptical. Not his methods, Luna clarified. But his underlying ambition, a wizarding world united under enlightened control. Grindelwald tried to achieve it through force. Dumbledore chose manipulation instead. That's a rather extraordinary claim, Brightwood noted. What evidence supports it? The timing, Luna replied simply. The first documented compulsions in Hogwarts students appear in the autumn term of 1945, just months after Grindelwald's defeat. And look at the pattern of whom he targeted first. She pointed to a list of names on one of Hermione's charts. The children of those who opposed Grindelwald most vocally. He began by ensuring the next generation of potential resistance would be hampered. An uncomfortable silence fell as they absorbed this theory. It makes sense, Harry finally said. Dumbledore's always talked about the greater good. That was Grindelwald's motto, wasn't it? It was, Sirius confirmed grimly. Carved over the entrance to Nermangard prison. For the greater good. But Dumbledore fought against Grindelwald, Ron objected. He's always been considered the champion of the light. Perhaps he objected to Grindelwald's methods but not his vision, Hermione suggested. Or perhaps defeating Grindelwald changed him somehow. Power corrupts, Lupin said quietly. And Albus wielded more power than perhaps any wizard in modern history, not just magical power, but political and social influence as well. We need more information, Brightwood decided, gathering her diagnostic tools. I'll share this theory with the investigation team. In the meantime, Mr. Potter should continue his recovery and magical recalibration. After she departed, the group fell into thoughtful silence, each processing the implications of Luna's theory. If she's right, Harry finally said, then Dumbledore's been playing a much longer game than anyone realized. The question is, what was his endgame? What was all this manipulation leading toward? Whatever it was, Sirius said grimly, I suspect you were meant to be the centerpiece. In the depths of the Department of Mysteries, unspeakable Croaker stood before an enormous magical display, his weathered face illuminated by the glowing strands of magic that represented Albus Dumbledore's web of influence. The display had been constructed using data from the compulsion removals at Hogwarts, the Ministry, and St. Mungo's, creating a comprehensive map of magical influence spanning 5 decades. Impressive, isn't it? He remarked to the witch beside him. Disturbing, but impressive. Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, studied the display with narrowed eyes. 50 years of undetected magical manipulation at this scale, it should have been impossible. It would have been, for anyone else, Croaker agreed. But Albus had 3 advantages others lacked: unparalleled magical power, unprecedented access to Britain's magical youth through Hogwarts, and perhaps most importantly, universal trust. Who suspects the kindly headmaster of mind control? Amelia said bitterly. Especially when half your own thoughts have been planted by him. Croaker nodded, manipulating the display to highlight certain connection points. We've identified 7 major nodes in his influence network, each corresponding to a different sphere of society. Hogwarts, obviously. The Ministry. St. Mungo's. Gringotts. The Wiesengemot. The International Diplomatic Corps. And the press. Total spectrum control, Amelia observed. He could influence public opinion, policy, education, healthcare, finance, and international relations simultaneously. And he did so undetected for nearly half a century. Croaker expanded the display, focusing on a particular section. This is where it began, Hogwarts, September 1945. His first subjects were 7th-year students about to graduate into influential positions. Amelia leaned closer. Including my father. And Bartemius Crouch. And Millicent Bagnold. Future department heads and a minister of magic, Croaker confirmed. By the time they reached those positions, they'd been under subtle compulsion for decades. Nothing dramatic enough to raise suspicion, just enough to ensure they would support certain policies and oppose others. And when the war with Voldemort came, Croaker manipulated the display again, advancing the timeline to the 1970s. The web grew dramatically more complex. That's when Albus escalated. The chaos of war provided perfect cover for more aggressive enchantments. He used Voldemort, Amelia realized, horrified. Used the war as an opportunity to expand his control. I believe so, yes. And the aftermath even more so. Another adjustment, and the display showed the early 1980s. Following Voldemort's fall, Albus consolidated power dramatically. With his status as the mentor of the prophesied defeater of the Dark Lord, his influence was virtually unquestionable. And that's when Harry Potter went to the Dursleys, Amelia noted grimly. Conveniently isolated from the wizarding world under Albus's sole authority. Indeed. But that's not all. Croaker hesitated. We've uncovered evidence suggesting Albus may have had prior knowledge of the attack on the Potters. He placed monitoring charms on their home in Godric's Hollow weeks before Voldemort's attack. Amelia paled. Are you suggesting he allowed it to happen? The evidence is circumstantial but concerning. At minimum, he anticipated the possibility and prepared accordingly. To what end? Control of the Potter child, who represented both immense political value as the boy who lived and extraordinary magical potential. The Potter bloodline has produced remarkably powerful wizards for generations. Amelia rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. Any word on Dumbledore's current whereabouts? None. He's evaded every tracking attempt. The International Confederation has issued an alert, but given how many foreign officials were also under his influence, he could be anywhere, with nearly unlimited resources at his disposal, Amelia concluded. And potentially still able to activate compulsions in those not yet identified and treated. Precisely our concern. The door opened, admitting Kingsley Shacklebolt. Madam Bones, unspeakable croaker. We've had a development at Hogwarts. The house elves have discovered a hidden chamber beneath the headmaster's office. Containing? Croaker asked sharply. Records. Extensive records dating back to 1945. And something else, a magical device we can't identify. The unspeakables on site have requested your personal attention, Croaker. I'll leave immediately, Croaker decided, already moving toward the door. Amelia, you should come as well. If we found Albus's archive, it could answer many of our questions. And raise 100 more, I suspect, she sighed, following him out. Harry stood at the edge of the Black Lake, watching the giant squid lazily wave its tentacles in the afternoon sunlight. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery of Dumbledore's manipulations, and Hogwarts had settled into an uneasy new normal. Classes had resumed with a modified faculty, McGonagall as acting headmistress, several professors temporarily replaced while undergoing treatment at St. Mungo's, and a contingent of ministry experts assisting with curriculum review. For Harry, the past weeks had brought daily discoveries about himself. His magical abilities had expanded dramatically as the final compulsions were carefully removed. His appearance had subtly changed, his hair now lay relatively flat, his facial structure less sharply reminiscent of James Potter, though the resemblance remained clear. Most significantly, his personality had stabilized into something both familiar and new, recognizably Harry, but more confident, more thoughtful, less prone to impulsive action. Contemplating the mysteries of the universe, came Sirius's voice from behind him. Harry turned with a smile. Just thinking about everything that's changed. Sirius joined him at the water's edge. Having regrets? No, Harry answered immediately. It's disorienting sometimes, but I'd rather know the truth, however uncomfortable, than live in a comfortable lie. Spoken like a true Potter, Sirius approved. Your father would say the same. The mention of James no longer brought the immediate pang of loss it once had. With the compulsions removed, Harry found himself able to think of his parents with a more balanced sense of grief, still present but not overwhelming. Would he? Harry asked. I'm not sure I know who my father really was anymore. All the stories I've heard were filtered through Dumbledore's influence. Fair point, Sirius acknowledged. Well, the real James was brilliant but often arrogant, fiercely loyal, occasionally a complete prat, and utterly devoted to your mother and you. He had a talent for transfiguration that made McGonagall weep with joy and a blind spot for his own privilege that Lily spent years helping him recognize. Harry smiled at the unvarnished assessment. And my mum? Lily was a force of nature. Brilliant at charms and potions, terrifying when angry, and possessed of a moral compass that never wavered. She had a temper that could strip paint from walls and a capacity for forgiveness that humbled everyone around her. Sirius paused, his expression softening. You have more of her in you than I initially realized. The compulsion suppressed a lot of her qualities in you. Like what? Your analytical mind, for one. Lily never accepted information without questioning it. And your talent for potions, without Snape's artificially induced hostility and your own compulsions limiting your performance, you've shown remarkable aptitude these past weeks. It was true. Under the temporary potions instructor, Harry had discovered a natural intuition for brewing that had previously been inaccessible. His grades across all subjects had improved dramatically as the academic suppression compulsions dissolved. Speaking of Snape, Harry said, I heard he's returning next week. Sirius nodded, his expression complex. He is. The healers have declared his treatment complete, though he'll need ongoing monitoring. Are you worried about seeing him? Harry asked perceptively. Terrified, Sirius admitted with surprising honesty. The man has every reason to hate me, compulsions or not. I was cruel to him when we were students. But how much of that was really you, and how much was Dumbledore's influence? Sirius sighed. That's the question we're all asking ourselves, isn't it? Where do the compulsions end and our true selves begin? The healers say we may never have perfect clarity on that. Their conversation was interrupted by a silvery lynx Patronus bounding across the grounds toward them. It spoke with Kingsley's voice, "Come to the headmaster's office immediately. Major discovery in the hidden chamber." They exchanged glances before setting off at a quick pace toward the castle. In the entrance hall, they encountered Hermione and Ron hurrying in the same direction. "You got Kingsley's message too?" Hermione asked breathlessly. "Just now," Harry confirmed. "Any idea what they've found?" "No, but Luna said something cryptic about the pattern becoming clear before running off to the office ahead of us." The four of them made their way to McGonagall's office, still referred to by most as the headmaster's office despite her temporary appointment. The gargoyle guarding the entrance stood aside without requiring a password, recognizing their magical signatures as authorized visitors. They found the circular office crowded with people: McGonagall, Kingsley, Amelia Bones, Unspeakable Croaker, Bill Weasley, Luna, and several ministry officials Harry didn't recognize. The room had been expanded magically to accommodate not only the additional people but also a massive array of documents, magical artifacts, and most prominently, an enormous three-dimensional magical model hovering in the center of the room. "Ah, Mr. Potter, excellent," McGonagall greeted them. "We were just about to begin the briefing." "What is all this?" Harry asked, gazing at the floating model. It appeared to be a complex representation of magical currents and nodes, somehow familiar yet entirely alien. "Albus Dumbledore's master plan," Croaker replied grimly. "Or at least, our best reconstruction of it based on the records discovered in his hidden archive." "Perhaps you should start at the beginning, Saul," Amelia suggested, gesturing for everyone to take seats that had been arranged in a semicircle facing the model. Croaker nodded, moving to stand beside the display. 3 days ago, Hogwarts house elves discovered a concealed chamber beneath this office, accessible only through a passage that required Albus's specific magical signature. Inside, we found extensive records dating back to 1945, detailing his Greater Harmony Initiative, as he called it. Greater Harmony? Hermione repeated skeptically. "His term, not ours," Croaker clarified. According to his private journals, Albus became convinced after defeating Grindelwald that magical society was fundamentally unstable. He believed that without intervention, magical civilization would eventually destroy itself through cyclical Dark Lord conflicts and increasing isolation from the Muggle world. "That's not entirely unreasonable," Bill noted. "Magical history does show that pattern." "Perhaps," Amelia acknowledged. But his solution crossed every ethical boundary imaginable. He developed a plan to gradually reshape magical society over multiple generations through selective compulsion and magical suppression. "Reshape how, exactly?" Sirius asked. Croaker manipulated the floating model, highlighting certain sections. "His ultimate goal appears to have been the creation of a magically harmonious society in which extreme power disparities were eliminated and certain dangerous magical affinities were selectively bred out of the population." A stunned silence followed this revelation. "He was practicing magical eugenics," Hermione whispered, horrified. "Precisely," Croaker confirmed. "But with compulsion rather than extermination as his method. He identified magical bloodlines with traits he considered destabilizing: exceptional power, natural affinity for mind arts, certain rare abilities like Parseltongue, and systematically suppressed them while encouraging the propagation of traits he deemed beneficial." "Like what?" Harry asked. "Affinity for defensive rather than offensive magic. Cooperative magical frameworks rather than individualistic power. Respect for magical limitations rather than the drive to transcend them." Ron frowned. "He was making us all safer. More manageable. More mediocre," Luna corrected softly. Removing the peaks and valleys from the magical landscape until everything was a gentle, rolling plain. But why? Harry pressed. What was the endgame? Croaker exchanged glances with Amelia before answering. According to his later journals, he believed he was preparing magical society for an eventual controlled revelation to the Muggle world. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. He wanted to end the statute of secrecy. McGonagall looked thunderstruck. Eventually, yes, but only after magical society had been thoroughly harmonized to present no threat to Muggles, Croaker explained. He estimated the process would take approximately 200 years of careful manipulation. And he believed he would direct this process for 2 centuries. Sirius asked incredulously. Ah, that's where it gets even more disturbing, Croaker said, manipulating the model again to reveal a pulsing golden node at its center. We discovered a device in the hidden chamber that appears to be a highly advanced form of magical consciousness preservation. Our analysis suggests Albus was preparing to transfer his consciousness into this device upon his physical death, allowing him to continue directing his plan indefinitely. Horror settled over the room as the implications sank in. A magical Horcrux, Harry murmured. Not using soul magic, but something similar. Similar in purpose though different in method, Croaker agreed. Without the moral corruption inherent in Horcruxes. Debatable, Kingsley muttered. What was my role in all this? Harry asked the question that had been haunting him for weeks. Where did I fit into his grand plan? Croaker hesitated, glancing at McGonagall, who nodded reluctantly. You, Mr. Potter, were intended to be the linchpin of the next phase, Croaker explained. Albus identified you before your birth as magically exceptional, a convergence of several powerful bloodlines. The prophecy regarding you and Voldemort provided the perfect opportunity to shape you into what he called a harmonic focus. A what? A magical nexus point through which broad-scale harmonizing enchantments could be channeled, Croaker clarified. He was conditioning you to eventually serve as a willing conduit for magic that would affect the entire population. Harry felt the blood drain from his face. He was going to use me as a weapon. A tool, more precisely, Amelia corrected gently. One you would have willingly become, under his careful conditioning. The compulsions were preparing you to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, Luna added softly. First against Voldemort, then for increasingly larger causes, until eventually sacrificing your autonomous magic for Dumbledore's harmonizing ritual. The room spun around Harry as the full horror of his intended fate sank in. He was grooming me to be a magical martyr. Yes, McGonagall said simply, her voice thick with guilt and anger. And those of us who should have protected you were rendered incapable of seeing it. A tense silence fell, broken only when Hermione tentatively raised her hand, academic habits reasserting themselves despite the circumstances. What about Voldemort? She asked. How did he fit into this plan? According to Albus's records, Tom Riddle represented everything he was trying to eliminate from magical society, Croaker explained. Extreme individual power, ambition unconstrained by ethical considerations, magical innovation without regard for established limitations. Albus initially attempted to control him through compulsions during his Hogwarts years. But they failed, Harry guessed. Indeed. Riddle's natural occlumency and paranoia made him resistant. When direct control proved impossible, Albus shifted to a containment strategy, allowing Riddle to become Voldemort while ensuring the conflict remained controlled and ultimately served his long-term goals. He let people die, Sirius growled, to further his social engineering project. The journals suggest he considered it an acceptable sacrifice for the harmony of future generations, Amelia confirmed grimly. He specifically calculated casualty thresholds he deemed sustainable. Harry felt physically ill. The man he had trusted, admired, even loved as a mentor, had coldly planned the deaths of innocents, including potentially his own parents, as acceptable losses in a centuries-long manipulation. And now? Harry finally asked. What's he planning now that his scheme has been exposed? That remains unclear, Kingsley admitted. We found no indication that he had a contingency plan for complete exposure. Our best guess is that he's regrouping, possibly attempting to salvage elements of his plan. He'll come for Harry, Luna said with quiet certainty. The harmonic focus is too central to his design to abandon. A chill ran through the room at her words. Miss Lovegood is likely correct, Croaker agreed. Which is why security around Mr. Potter remains our highest priority. I'm not hiding, Harry stated firmly. I've spent my whole life as his puppet. I won't spend the next phase cowering in fear of him. No one is suggesting you cower, Mr. Potter, McGonagall assured him. But reasonable precautions are hardly cowardice. Besides, Sirius added, we have more immediate concerns than Albus at the moment. He turned to Croaker. Did the records provide any information about Voldemort's Horcruxes? They did, Croaker confirmed. Albus had identified several likely candidates and their possible locations. He believed Voldemort created 6 intentional Horcruxes, plus the accidental one in Mr. Potter's scar. Which has now been removed, Kingsley noted. Correct. Of the 6 intentional Horcruxes, 1 has been destroyed, the diary. That leaves 5 remaining. What are they? Harry asked. Croaker manipulated the model again, bringing forward 5 distinct images, a locket, a cup, a diadem, a ring, and a large snake. Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diadem, the Gaunt family ring, and Voldemort's familiar, Nagini, he identified them. Albus had determined the likely locations of the ring and the diadem, had suspicions about the cup, and was still researching the locket. The snake, obviously, remains with Voldemort himself. So we need to find and destroy these objects to ensure Voldemort can't return to full power, Hermione summarized. Precisely, Miss Granger. The Ministry has already assembled a specialized team for this purpose, including several Cursebreakers and Unspeakables. I want to help, Harry said immediately. Absolutely not, Sirius and McGonagall replied in unison. You're 13 years old, Harry, Sirius continued. This isn't your responsibility. Voldemort has been trying to kill me specifically since I was a baby, Harry countered. I had a piece of his soul in my head for 12 years. I'm already involved whether you like it or not. Being involved doesn't mean you need to be on the front lines, Amelia interjected reasonably. There are many ways to contribute that don't involve unnecessary risk. Like what? Harry challenged. Research, Hermione suggested. We could help analyze Dumbledore's records, look for information about the Horcruxes he might have missed. And magical training, Bill added. If Voldemort does eventually return, or if Dumbledore makes another attempt to control you, you'll need advanced defensive skills. Harry wanted to argue further but recognized the wisdom in their words. Fine, he conceded. Research and training for now. But I want to be kept informed about the Horcrux hunt. Agreed, Kingsley nodded. Regular briefings for you and your core support group. He gestured to include Sirius, Hermione, and Ron. And we should establish a secure communication protocol, Croaker added. In case Albus attempts to infiltrate Hogwarts or contact any of you. The meeting continued for another hour, establishing security procedures and research assignments. As it concluded, Harry found himself mentally and emotionally exhausted, still processing the scope of Dumbledore's deception and his own intended role in it. Luna approached him as the others began to disperse. It's a lot to absorb, isn't it? She said softly. Finding out you were meant to be a sacrificial magical conduit. Harry managed a weak smile. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse than having 34 compulsions and a piece of Voldemort in my head. You're handling it remarkably well, she observed. Most people would be crushed under the weight of such revelations. I don't feel like I'm handling it well at all, Harry admitted. I feel angry and violated and confused. Those are healthy reactions, Luna assured him. It would be concerning if you weren't feeling them. She paused, studying him with her unnaturally perceptive gaze. The Nargles say you're at a crossroads now. What do you mean? You have a choice in how you respond to all this. You could let the anger consume you, let yourself be defined by what was done to you. Or you could use it as a catalyst to define yourself. Her words struck a chord. Define myself, Harry repeated thoughtfully. I'm not sure I know how to do that yet. Nobody does at first, Luna shrugged. That's what living is for. The room of requirement had become their sanctuary. Harry had discovered it accidentally while pacing the 7th-floor corridor, wishing for a safe place to practice his expanding magical abilities away from curious eyes. The room had obligingly appeared, offering a spacious training area equipped with everything they might need. Over the past 2 weeks, it had evolved into the headquarters for what Ron jokingly called Dumbledore's Army, though the name had stuck despite its irony. The group had grown beyond just Harry, Ron, and Hermione to include Neville, Luna, Ginny, Fred and George, and occasionally others who had shown particular aptitude or determination in overcoming their compulsions. Today, Harry stood at the center of the room, facing Neville across a dueling circle. Both had progressed remarkably in their magical recovery, developing powers that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. Ready? Harry asked, settling into a dueling stance. Neville nodded, his expression focused. Gone was the timid, forgetful boy of previous years, replaced by a confident young wizard growing into his considerable power. They bowed formally, then began. Neville struck first, summoning a wave of earth from the floor that rushed toward Harry like a miniature avalanche. Harry responded with a wandless shield, then transfigured the earth into harmless butterflies that scattered in all directions. Nice one, Sirius commented from the sidelines, where he was observing with Lupin. The duel continued, growing increasingly complex. Neville's command of elemental magic was extraordinary. He could manipulate earth, conjure plants to bind an opponent, and even pull moisture from the air to create disorienting mists. Harry countered with his exceptional shielding and an increasingly diverse repertoire of transfiguration and charms. After 10 intense minutes, they called a draw, both breathing heavily but grinning with exhilaration. That was brilliant, Ron enthused, tossing them both towels. That thing you did with the butterflies, Harry, McGonagall would give her left arm to see transfiguration that smooth. And Neville's elemental work is approaching mastery level, Hermione added, looking up from the advanced arithmancy text she'd been studying. Professor Sprout mentioned that the last known earth elemental in Britain was your great-grandfather, Neville. Neville flushed with pleasure. Gran's been sharing family journals with me. Apparently, the talent appears every few generations but usually gets mistaken for just having a green thumb. Or gets suppressed by manipulative headmasters, George added darkly. Speaking of whom, Fred segued, any news on the Dumbledore front? Sirius shook his head. Nothing solid. There have been possible sightings in Albania, Greece, and Peru, but nothing confirmed. And the Horcrux team? Harry asked, toweling off his face. They've located Ravenclaw's diadem, Lupin reported. It was hidden here at Hogwarts, in what the house elves call the come-and-go room, another configuration of this very space. Exclamations of surprise filled the room. Here. All this time. Hermione looked stunned. Has it been destroyed? Not yet, Sirius replied. They're studying it first, trying to understand the enchantments. Bill says it could provide insights that help locate the others. What about Professor Snape? Neville asked, surprising Harry. Is he still coming back tomorrow? Yes, though he'll be on a modified teaching schedule, Lupin confirmed. The healers want him to reintegrate gradually. The mention of Snape triggered a memory Harry had been meaning to discuss. I've been having strange dreams about him, he admitted. Or not dreams exactly, more like returning memories that were blocked. What kind of memories? Sirius asked, suddenly alert. From when I was very young. Before my parents died. Harry hesitated, uncertain how to explain the fragmented images. In the memories, Snape is kind. He's holding me, reading to me. In one, he's arguing with Dumbledore about something, looking really upset. A heavy silence followed this revelation. The healers mentioned this possibility, Lupin finally said. As the compulsions dissolve completely, early memories that were heavily modified might resurface. But Snape hated my father, Harry objected. Why would he be caring for me as a baby? He and your mother were childhood friends, Sirius explained reluctantly. Best friends for many years, until a falling out during their 5th year. But according to what we've learned from the compulsion removals, they had reconciled to some degree before her death. Reconciled? Harry repeated. What does that mean exactly? Sirius and Lupin exchanged uncomfortable glances. It means, came a silky voice from the doorway, that your mother forgave me for my egregious mistakes, against all reason and logic. Severus Snape stood in the entrance to the room of requirement, his appearance so transformed that Harry barely recognized him. Gone was the sallow complexion and greasy hair, the perpetual sneer and billowing black robes. This Snape stood straight and calm, his hair clean and tied back neatly, his teaching robes a deep midnight blue rather than unrelenting black. Most striking was his expression, neutral rather than hostile, his dark eyes clear and direct as they met Harry's. Professor, Harry managed, unsure how to react to this unfamiliar version of his longtime tormentor. Mr. Potter, Snape acknowledged with a slight nod. I was informed I might find you here. I believe we have matters to discuss before my official return tomorrow. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Sirius stood slowly, positioning himself subtly between Snape and Harry. Is this necessary now, Severus? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. Harry's just finished an intensive training session. This has waited 12 years, Black. It can wait no longer. Snape's eyes never left Harry's face. With your permission, Mr. Potter. In private. Harry hesitated, then nodded. It's all right, he told the others. The room will give us a separate space. As if on cue, a door appeared in the far wall. Harry moved toward it, aware of Snape following and the concerned gazes of his friends tracking their movement. Beyond the door was a simple sitting room with 2 comfortable chairs facing a fireplace. Harry took one, watching warily as Snape took the other. For a long moment, neither spoke. Snape seemed to be gathering his thoughts, his fingers steepled before him in a gesture Harry had never seen him make before. I owe you an apology, Snape finally said, his voice lacking its usual edge. Many apologies, in fact, but we must start somewhere. Harry blinked, taken aback. An apology? For 2 years of unconscionable treatment, Snape clarified. I was under numerous compulsions, yes, but that does not absolve me of responsibility. Some part of me should have recognized the wrongness of my behavior toward a child in my care. The compulsions were designed to prevent exactly that recognition, Harry pointed out, surprising himself by defending the man. Perhaps. Nevertheless. Snape's gaze was direct, unflinching. I have treated you abhorrently, and for that, I am deeply sorry. The simple, straightforward apology left Harry momentarily speechless. Of all the changes the compulsion removals had brought, Severus Snape expressing genuine remorse ranked among the most surreal. Thank you, Harry finally managed. I appreciate that. Snape nodded once, then continued. There are other matters we must address. You mentioned recovering memories of me from your infancy. Yes. They're fragmented, but clear enough. You were different with me then. I was myself then, Snape corrected quietly. Before Albus layered his compulsions over my grief and guilt. You and my mother had reconciled? Harry prompted, returning to the statement that had triggered Snape's appearance. A complex emotion passed across Snape's features. Yes. After several years of estrangement, Lily and I reconnected during the war. I had made certain choices I deeply regretted. She helped me find a path back from them. You became a spy, Harry guessed, piecing together fragments of information he'd gathered. Yes. For Dumbledore, or so I believed at the time. Snape's mouth twisted bitterly. In reality, I was serving his greater scheme without knowing it. But my reconciliation with Lily was genuine, as was my relationship with you as an infant. What kind of relationship? Harry asked carefully. Snape hesitated, then reached inside his robes and withdrew a small vial containing a silvery substance, a memory. This will explain better than I can. The healers at St. Mungo's helped me recover it intact. Harry eyed the vial uncertainly. I don't have a pensieve. The room obligingly provided one, a shallow stone basin materializing on the table between them. Convenient, Snape remarked with a raised eyebrow. The room of requirement lives up to its name. He carefully poured the memory into the pensieve, where it swirled silvery white. This is from July 31st, 1981, your first birthday. If you wish to view it, simply touch the surface with your finger. Harry hesitated only briefly before leaning forward and touching the swirling memory. Immediately, he felt the familiar sensation of falling, then landed gently in a sun-dappled garden behind a cottage he somehow recognized as his parents' home in Godric's Hollow. A birthday party was underway. A wooden table held a small cake decorated with a single candle, surrounded by a modest collection of presents. In a nearby chair sat Lily Potter, radiant in a simple green sundress that matched her eyes, Harry's eyes. Beside her stood James Potter, his arm draped casually around her shoulders, laughing at something out of view. And there, sitting cross-legged on the grass, was a younger Severus Snape, looking so different that Harry barely recognized him. This Snape wore casual Muggle clothing, dark jeans and a grey button-down shirt, and his hair was shorter, clean and healthy. Most striking was his expression, relaxed, almost happy, as he supervised baby Harry playing with a toy broomstick hovering inches above the ground. Careful, little one, Memory Snape murmured as baby Harry wobbled precariously. Steady now. The infant Harry giggled delightedly, reaching up to grab Snape's extended fingers for balance. He's a natural, Lily, Snape called over his shoulder. James will have his Quidditch star yet. Don't encourage him, Sev, Lily laughed, moving to join them on the grass. James is already planning his professional career. Can you blame me? James grinned, following his wife. With those reflexes at 1 year old? He'll be catching snitches before he can walk properly. The easy camaraderie between the three adults stunned Harry. This was nothing like the bitter enmity he'd been led to believe existed between his father and Snape. The scene shifted slightly. Now the small group sat around the table, baby Harry in a high chair, smearing cake enthusiastically on his face while the adults looked on with fond amusement. Before we finished the celebrations, James said, suddenly serious, Lily and I wanted to discuss something with you, Severus. Memory Snape raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned? Not at all, Lily assured him, taking his hand. We've been thinking about Harry's future. With the war and the prophecy, with everything so uncertain. We want to make sure he's protected if anything happens to us, James continued. Sirius is his godfather, of course, but we want more safeguards. What are you asking? Snape inquired, though his expression suggested he already knew. We want you to take a godparent oath as well, Lily said simply. A secondary protection, linked not to legal guardianship but to magical guardianship. Snape looked stunned. James, are you certain? There are others who would be more suitable. There's no one I trust more with my son's magical development and safety, James replied firmly. Our history is complicated, yes, but you've proven your loyalty beyond any doubt. And you love him already, don't bother denying it, we can all see it. Memory Snape glanced at baby Harry, who was now reaching pudgy, frosting-covered hands toward him, babbling, Sev, demandingly. I do, Snape admitted softly, allowing the baby to grab his finger. Though Merlin knows why he's attached himself to me so thoroughly. Excellent taste, Lily smiled. So, will you take the oath? It would mean a great deal to us. Memory Snape's expression grew solemn. I would be honored. The scene shifted again. Now they stood in what appeared to be the cottage's sitting room. James, Lily, and Snape formed a triangle, with baby Harry at its center in a specially prepared runic circle. All three adults had their wands extended, touching over the child's head. I, Severus Tobias Snape, Memory Snape intoned, do hereby accept the sacred duty of magical guardian to Harry James Potter, to guide, protect, and nurture his magical development, to preserve his well-being above my own, and to ensure his magical heritage is honored and maintained. On my magic, I so swear. A brilliant silver light enveloped baby Harry, connecting him to Snape with a shimmering cord that sank beneath the skin over his heart. The oath is accepted, James declared formally, before breaking into a wide smile. Welcome to the family, officially. The memory began to fade, dissolving into swirling mist as Harry felt himself being drawn upward, back to the present. He emerged from the pensive gasping, tears streaming down his face without his awareness. Across from him, Snape sat perfectly still, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes suspiciously bright. You were my magical guardian, Harry whispered. You took an oath. I did, Snape confirmed quietly. An oath subsequently buried beneath layers of compulsion so deep I could not access even the memory of it, let alone fulfill its obligations. But the oath itself, it was still in effect. Yes. Magical oaths cannot be negated by compulsion. They can only be suppressed, creating a devastating internal conflict. Snape's voice held carefully controlled anger. For 12 years, I was magically bound to protect you while simultaneously compelled to despise and undermine you. The psychological toll was significant. That's why you saved me during the Quidditch match in first year, Harry realized. And why you tried to protect me from Quirrell. The oath was fighting through the compulsions, forcing me to act against Albus's carefully constructed hatreds. Snape's mouth twisted bitterly. Even then, I found ways to fulfill the letter of the oath while violating its spirit, protecting your life while destroying your confidence and happiness. That wasn't you, Harry said firmly, surprising himself with his certainty. That was Dumbledore's creation. You are remarkably forgiving, Mr. Potter. Harry, he corrected automatically. If we were close enough for me to call you, Sev, as a baby, I think you can use my first name now. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, pain, perhaps, or hope. Harry, then. Though I have forfeited any right to such familiarity. I don't think that's true, Harry replied thoughtfully. The way I see it, we've both been Dumbledore's puppets. We can either stay tangled in the strings he attached, or we can cut them and decide for ourselves who we want to be to each other. Snape studied him with an inscrutable expression. You are very much your mother's son, he finally said. She had that same capacity to see beyond pain to possibility. Tell me about her, Harry requested suddenly. Not the sanitized version everyone gives me, but the real person. You knew her better than anyone, didn't you? I did, once. Snape's expression softened slightly. She was brilliant but stubborn, kind but fiercely protective. She could hold a grudge with impressive tenacity. It took me 2 years to earn her forgiveness after our falling out. She loved music, particularly Muggle rock bands that would have given Minerva apoplexy had she known Lily played them in the prefect's bathroom. Harry smiled, drinking in these small details that made his mother feel real in a way the usual platitudes never had. She was terrified of deep water but insisted on learning to swim anyway, because she refused to let fear control her choices, Snape continued, warming to the subject. She detested traditional wizarding fashion and altered all her school robes to include hidden pockets for Muggle items, pens that actually worked, rather than quills, and those sticky paper notes that Muggles use. Post-it notes. Harry supplied, grinning at this revelation. Yes, those. She had them everywhere, color-coded by subject. Snape's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. And despite her reputation as a model student, she had a definite mischievous streak. Many of the marauders' more elegant pranks had Lily's invisible hand guiding them, though only I ever suspected. And my father? Harry asked hesitantly, unsure if this was pushing too far. To his surprise, Snape answered without hesitation or obvious rancor. James Potter and I were never friends, even after I reconciled with Lily. But we developed a mutual respect built on our shared commitment to her happiness and your safety. He was arrogant and privileged, yes, but also courageous and unfailingly loyal. By the time you were born, he had matured considerably from the thoughtless bully of our school days. You didn't hate each other? Not even a little. Oh, we maintained a healthy rivalry, Snape clarified, a hint of dark amusement in his tone. But it had transformed from genuine animosity to something more akin to competitive respect. He saved my life once, at considerable risk to his own. That sort of debt changes the dynamic between men, even former enemies. Harry absorbed this, another piece of his parents' true history slotting into place. After they died, what happened to you? Why weren't you part of my life? Snape's expression darkened. According to the recovered memories, I attempted to claim guardianship based on the magical oath. Albus blocked me at every turn, insisting the blood protections with your Muggle relatives were paramount. When I persisted, he escalated to direct compulsion. My memories of the oath were buried, my natural affection for you twisted into bitterness, my grief for Lily corrupted into obsession. And no one noticed. No one questioned why you suddenly hated the child you'd sworn to protect. Those who might have known of the oath were either dead, imprisoned, or similarly compelled, Snape replied grimly. Black was in Azkaban, Lupin was sent away on long-term missions for the Order, and those few others who attended your first birthday were systematically distanced from you. It was all so calculated, Harry said quietly. So thorough. Albus left nothing to chance where you were concerned. You were too central to his plans. They sat in silence for a moment, each processing the weight of revelation and shared history. So what happens now? Harry finally asked. With the oath, with everything. The oath remains in effect, Snape replied carefully. Now that the compulsions are removed, I can feel it clearly again, a commitment to your well-being that exists independent of any personal feelings I might have. But do you want to fulfill it? Harry pressed. Beyond the magical obligation, I mean. Do you want any role in my life? Snape considered the question with obvious seriousness. I believe I do, though I have no right to expect such an opportunity. What that role might be should be determined primarily by your wishes, not mine. I don't know what I want yet, Harry admitted. This is all so new. But I think. I'd like to get to know you. The real you, not Dumbledore's version. And maybe you could tell me more about my mother. About who I was as a baby, before everything changed. I would be amenable to that arrangement, Snape replied, his formal words belied by the subtle softening around his eyes. Good, Harry nodded. We'll start there and see where it goes. As they rose to rejoin the others, Harry felt another piece of his true history settling into place, not erasing the pain of the past, but providing context that made it more bearable. Dumbledore had stolen so much from him, from all of them. But with each recovered memory, each rebuilt relationship, they reclaimed a little of what had been lost. The Horcrux team had established their headquarters in an expanded section of the Department of Mysteries, accessible only to those with specific authorization. Harry, having finally worn down the adults' resistance through a combination of logical arguments and sheer stubbornness, had been granted limited access for briefing purposes only. Today, he stood beside Bill Weasley before an elaborate magical display showing the status of their Horcrux hunt. 3 glowing green markers indicated success, the diary, the diadem, and now the ring, which had been recovered from the ruins of a shack near Little Hangleton just 2 days earlier. The ring was nasty, Bill explained, pointing to a heavily warded container on a nearby table. Cursed to kill anyone who attempted to wear it. Croaker nearly lost his hand before we identified all the protections. Why would anyone want to wear it? Harry asked, peering at the blackened, cracked stone visible through the container's transparent top. It doesn't look particularly valuable. Ah, that's where you're wrong, Bill replied. The ring itself is unremarkable, but the stone set in it is another matter entirely. We believe it may be the resurrection stone of legend. From the Deathly Hallows? Harry clarified, recalling the wizarding fairy tale Hermione had shared during their research. The stone that supposedly lets you speak with the dead. Exactly. Which explains why Voldemort would choose it for a Horcrux, an item of legendary power made even more powerful by containing a piece of his soul. Harry studied the cracked stone with newfound wariness. Can it still, call the dead? We don't know, Bill admitted. The Unspeakables are still studying it. The Horcrux aspect has been destroyed, but the stone's original enchantment may remain intact. They moved on to the next display, showing two items still to be located, the cup and the locket. We've had a breakthrough on the locket, Bill continued. According to records found in Dumbledore's hidden chamber, it was originally hidden in a seaside cave but was stolen by someone with the initials RAB. Regulus Arcturus Black, came Sirius's voice from behind them. My brother. Harry turned to see his godfather approaching, looking grim but determined. Your brother stole Voldemort's Horcrux. Why? That's what I intend to find out, Sirius replied. I'm headed to Grimmauld Place tomorrow, the ancestral Black home. If Regulus left any clues about what happened to the locket, they'll be there. I'm coming with you, Harry said immediately. Harry, Bill began cautiously. Don't bother arguing, Sirius interrupted with a hint of his old roguish smile. I already cleared it with Minerva and Amelia. Harry will be under my direct protection, and Grimmauld Place has wards that would make Gringotts envious. It's possibly the safest place in Britain after Hogwarts itself. Bill sighed. Fine, but you take additional security. Kingsley at minimum. Already arranged, Sirius confirmed. Now, what about the cup? Any leads? Bill turned back to the display. We suspect it's in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Bellatrix Lestrange was one of Voldemort's most trusted followers, and according to Dumbledore's notes, he entrusted her with a treasure beyond measure for safekeeping. Getting into a Gringotts vault without authorization would be nearly impossible, Harry noted. Yes, which is why we're pursuing diplomatic channels, Bill explained. The goblins have no love for dark wizards, and they particularly despise soul magic as an abomination. If we can provide sufficient evidence that the cup is indeed a Horcrux, they may agree to retrieve and destroy it themselves. And Nagini? Harry asked, gesturing to the final marker on the display, a red indicator showing an active target. That's the most problematic, Sirius admitted. The snake stays with Voldemort himself, who currently exists in a sort of wraith form somewhere in Albania, according to Dumbledore's intelligence. So we can't get to Nagini until we locate Voldemort, Harry summarized grimly. Essentially, yes. Though the good news is that without his Horcruxes, Voldemort will be vulnerable. Once we've destroyed the cup and the locket, we can turn our full attention to tracking him down. Harry nodded, feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. The systematic dismantling of Voldemort's immortality safeguards brought his eventual confrontation with the Dark Lord closer, a prospect both terrifying and somehow inevitable. There's something else you should know, Bill said, his expression serious. We've discovered communications between Dumbledore and various parties suggesting he deliberately orchestrated certain aspects of your previous encounters with Voldemort. What do you mean? Harry asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. The Philosopher's Stone incident wasn't an accident, Sirius explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. Albus arranged the entire scenario as a test of your abilities, your courage, your willingness to sacrifice yourself. The protections were specifically designed to be navigable by first years with your particular group's skill set. A test, Harry repeated flatly. And the Chamber of Secrets? Was that orchestrated too? Not entirely, Bill clarified. The diary coming into Ginny's possession appears to have been genuinely unexpected. But once Albus realized what was happening, he deliberately removed himself from the school to see how you would respond without his guidance. He used my sister as bait, came Ron's voice from the doorway. He stood there with Hermione, both having arrived for the scheduled briefing. Left her to die in that chamber to test Harry's heroic instincts. That's the conclusion the investigation team has reached, yes, Bill confirmed quietly. I'm sorry, Ron. Ron's face had gone pale beneath his freckles, his expression hard. When we find Dumbledore, I want to be there. We all do, Hermione said, placing a gentle hand on his arm. But first, we focus on the Horcruxes. One enemy at a time. Her practical approach cut through the rising tension. Harry nodded, grateful for her steady presence. Right. Tomorrow, Sirius and I go to Grimmauld Place to look for clues about the locket. In the meantime, we continue training and researching. And we maintain constant vigilance, Sirius added, unconsciously echoing Mad-Eye Moody's famous phrase. Dumbledore is still out there, and he's had decades to place contingencies we haven't yet discovered. The reminder sobered them all. For all the progress they'd made, removing compulsions, hunting Horcruxes, rebuilding their lives, both Voldemort and Dumbledore remained at large, each presenting a different but equally dangerous threat. We'll be ready, Harry said with more confidence than he felt. Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more puppet strings, no more manipulation. Just us, making our own choices. As they left the Department of Mysteries, Harry reflected on how much had changed in the weeks since Pomfrey's scan had revealed those 34 loyalty redirects. His entire world had been upended, his understanding of himself and those around him fundamentally altered. Yet from the chaos had emerged something precious, authentic connection, true agency, and the first real sense of belonging he'd ever known. Dumbledore's control scheme might have collapsed, but from its ruins, something stronger was being built. Something true. Grimmauld Place loomed dark and forbidding against the grey London sky. The townhouse seemed to shoulder its way between its neighbours, emanating an aura of brooding malevolence that made passing muggles unconsciously quicken their steps. Charming, isn't it? Sirius remarked dryly as they approached. Welcome to the noble and most ancient House of Black, where joy comes to die and childhood nightmares come to breed. You grew up here? Harry asked, eyeing the serpentine door knocker with distaste. Until I ran away at 16, Sirius confirmed. Not my fondest memories. They were accompanied by Kingsley and Tonks, the latter a young Auror with bubblegum pink hair who happened to be Sirius's cousin once removed. Harry had taken an immediate liking to her irreverent humor and metamorphmagus abilities. Watcher, cousin, Tonks grinned, deliberately tripping on the bottom step and catching herself with practiced ease. Ready to face the family demons? As I'll ever be, Sirius sighed, placing his hand on the door. The locks clicked open in recognition of his blood connection. Remember, touch nothing if you can help it. Most of the Black family heirlooms are cursed 6 ways to Sunday. The interior matched the promise of the exterior, gloomy, dusty, and permeated with dark magic that made Harry's skin crawl. Mounted house elf heads decorated the hallway, while portraits of scowling ancestors lined the walls, muttering disapprovingly as they passed. Cheery place, Harry commented, instinctively drawing closer to Sirius. Filth. Blood traitors. Shame of my flesh. The sudden shrieking made them all jump. A curtain had flown open, revealing a life-sized portrait of a woman whose face was contorted with rage. Hello, mother, Sirius said flatly. Still pleasant as ever, I see. You. The portrait howled. Disgrace of the House of Black. How dare you return? Oh, shut up, Tonks groaned, helping Kingsley yank the curtains closed again. Is she always like that? Walburga Black was actually more pleasant as a portrait than in life, Sirius replied grimly. At least the portrait can't use the cruciatus. Harry glanced sharply at his godfather, recognizing the casual reference to childhood abuse for what it was. He squeezed Sirius's arm supportively but said nothing, sensing this wasn't the moment for that conversation. "Where do we start looking for information about Regulus?" Kingsley asked, all business. "His bedroom first, then the library," Sirius decided. "Creature might know something as well, assuming the wretched creature is still alive." "Creature?" "The family house elf. Devoted to my mother and everything the Black family stands for. Or stood for, I suppose, since I'm the last of the direct line." As if summoned by the mention, a decrepit house elf appeared with a crack, muttering audibly, "Blood Trader Master returns with half-bloods and mudbloods. Oh, what would my poor mistress say?" Creature's heart breaks. "Charming as ever, Creature," Sirius said coolly. "We need information about Regulus, specifically about an item he may have taken from the Dark Lord." "A locket." Creature froze, his bloodshot eyes bulging even further. "Master knows about the locket? Master Regulus's locket?" Sirius exchanged surprised glances with the others. "Yes, that's exactly what we're looking for." "What do you know about it?" The house elf began to tremble, pulling at his ears in obvious distress. Creature failed his orders. Master Regulus said destroy it, but Creature tried everything, nothing worked, the locket would not break. "Creature," Harry said gently, crouching to the elf's level despite Sirius's warning gesture. "We can help destroy the locket. We know how. But we need to find it first." Creature studied Harry suspiciously. Half-Blood speaks kindly to Creature, Half-Blood offers to help Master Regulus's final wish. "Yes," Harry confirmed steadily. "Regulus was brave to steal the locket from Voldemort. We want to finish what he started." The name made Creature flinch, but the house elf seemed to reach a decision. "Creature will show." Creature kept it safe, waiting for a way to destroy it. They followed the elf to a cramped, musty bedroom on the uppermost floor. From beneath a loose floorboard, Creature withdrew a heavy golden locket emblazoned with an ornate S, Slytherin's locket, Kingsley breathed. "No doubt about it." "Creature," Sirius said, his voice gentler than before, "tell us exactly what happened with Regulus and this locket." The story that emerged was heartbreaking. Regulus, discovering Voldemort's dark secret after the Dark Lord casually sacrificed Creature in placing the Horcrux, Regulus, turning against his master in secret, Regulus, drinking deadly potion to retrieve the locket, ordering Creature to leave him to die and destroy the Horcrux. By the end, Sirius sat heavily on his brother's bed, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "He died a hero," he whispered. "All these years, I thought he was just another Death Eater, but he died fighting Voldemort in the only way he could." "We'll finish what he started," Harry promised, placing a hand on Sirius's shoulder. "We'll destroy it properly." They secured the locket in a specially warded container provided by the Unspeakables, promising Creature he would be present for its destruction. As they prepared to leave, Sirius turned to the house elf with newfound respect. "Creature, I've misjudged you," he acknowledged. "You were loyal to Regulus until the end, and beyond. I'm sorry for how I've treated you." The elf seemed speechless at this unexpected apology. "Master apologizes, to Creature." "Yes. And I promise you this, we will honor Regulus's sacrifice. His true story will be told, and he will be remembered not as a Death Eater, but as the hero he truly was." Creature straightened slightly, something like pride entering his posture. "Master Regulus was the best of the Blacks. Better than all the rest." "Better than I gave him credit for, certainly," Sirius agreed quietly. "Will you help us, Creature? This house could be useful in the fight against Voldemort, a headquarters where we can plan and prepare safely under the Black family wards." "Creature will help," the elf decided after a moment's consideration. "For Master Regulus. For finishing his work." As they departed Grimmauld Place with the locket securely contained, Harry reflected on how many lives Voldemort and Dumbledore had destroyed or diverted, Sirius and Regulus, torn apart by manipulated ideologies, Snape, twisted from protector to tormentor, countless students shaped to serve others' purposes rather than their own potential. "We've got 4 now," he remarked to Kingsley as they stepped into the ministry car waiting outside. "Just the cup and the snake left." "Progress," Kingsley agreed. "Though I suspect the final stages will be the most challenging." Harry nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. As they dismantled Voldemort's safeguards, they drew ever closer to a direct confrontation. And somewhere, Dumbledore watched and waited, his decades-long plan in ruins but his formidable intelligence and power still very much a threat. But for the first time since this journey began, Harry felt genuinely hopeful. With each recovered truth, each restored relationship, each destroyed Horcrux, they reclaimed a little more of their collective future from those who had tried to engineer it to their own design. Whatever came next, they would face it as their true selves, no longer puppets, but people making their own choices, writing their own stories. That, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. Chapter 3, Reclamation. Harry stood motionless at the center of the ritual circle, his breathing deliberately measured as power hummed around him. The Gringotts ritual chamber, a space few wizards ever witnessed, gleamed with ancient runes carved into obsidian walls, illuminated by hovering globes of magical light. Before him sat Hufflepuff's cup on a pedestal of black marble, its golden surface reflecting the crimson glow of the containment fields surrounding it. "Are you prepared, Mr. Potter?" Master Nagnock inquired, his gravelly voice echoing in the chamber. Harry nodded, meeting the goblin's eyes. "I understand my role." A month of negotiations had culminated in this moment. The goblins, initially resistant to any wizard interference in their bank, had finally agreed to retrieve the cup from the Lestrange vault after Bill Weasley presented irrefutable evidence of the Horcrux's nature. Soul magic violated the most sacred goblin taboos, and the idea that such an abomination had been stored in their vaults for years had provoked genuine outrage. The destruction, however, required a different approach than the previous Horcruxes. The cup's unique properties, imbued with Helga Hufflepuff's original healing enchantments, had merged with the soul fragment in unexpected ways. "Begin when ready," Nagnock directed. Harry closed his eyes, reaching for the magical technique Snape had taught him over the past weeks. Rather than forcing his will outward as most wizard magic required, this approach involved creating a deliberate emptiness, a magical vacuum that would draw out the corrupting energy while leaving the cup's original enchantments intact. The power rose around him as 6 goblin chanters began their low, rhythmic incantation. Harry felt the familiar warmth of his magic flowing through his core, but instead of channeling it outward, he shaped it into a hollow sphere, an absence into which the Horcrux might be drawn. "Excellent," came Bill's quiet voice from nearby. "Just like we practiced." The cup began to tremble on its pedestal. A black mist seeped from its surface, writhing as if in pain. Harry maintained his focus, expanding the magical vacuum. The mist twisted, trying to find purchase in the material world, then was inexorably pulled toward Harry's constructed void. A high, cold scream filled the chamber, Voldemort's essence recognizing its imminent destruction. Harry's scar, though no longer containing a soul fragment itself, prickled uncomfortably in sympathetic response. "Hold steady," Nagnock commanded as the black mist accelerated toward the vacuum. The moment it touched the boundary of Harry's magical construct, the mist ignited in emerald flame. The scream intensified, then abruptly ceased as the corrupted energy collapsed into itself and vanished. Harry released his breath slowly, letting the vacuum construct dissipate. The cup remained on its pedestal, now gleaming with a warm golden light that suggested its original magic had not only survived but flourished in the absence of the parasitic soul fragment. "5 down," Bill murmured, stepping forward to examine the cup. "Just the snake remaining." "Well done, Mr. Potter," Nagnock acknowledged with a formal bow, a gesture of respect rarely offered to wizards. "Your magical control is exceptional for one so young." "Thank you," Harry replied, returning the bow with equal formality. "The cup's original enchantments?" "Intact and purified," the goblin confirmed. "Hufflepuff's healing magic will now be accessible again after centuries of corruption." A significant recovery for wizard kind. As they emerged from the ritual chamber, Sirius and Snape waited in the antechamber, their expressions a study in contrast, Sirius openly relieved, Snape impassively watchful. "It's done?" Sirius asked, stepping forward to grip Harry's shoulder. "Successfully," Bill confirmed. "The Horcrux is destroyed and the cup's original magic preserved." As expected, Snape remarked, though Harry detected a hint of pride beneath the neutral tone. Their relationship had evolved significantly over the past months, developing into a cautious mentorship built on their gradually recovered shared history. "The time has come to address the final Horcrux," Nagnock stated, leading them toward a conference room adjacent to the ritual chambers. And by extension, the wraith of the Dark Lord himself. Inside the conference room, they found Lupin, Hermione, McGonagall, and Amelia Bones gathered around a table laden with maps and scrolls. Hermione looked up as they entered, her face lighting with relief. "It worked," she exclaimed, scanning their expressions. "The cup's intact." "Completely," Harry confirmed, taking a seat beside her. "Better than intact, Nagnock says the original enchantments are now active again." "Remarkable," McGonagall murmured. Helga Hufflepuff's healing enchantments were legendary. Their recovery alone would justify this entire endeavor. "Let's not lose focus," Amelia cautioned. "We still face significant challenges. Unspeakable Croaker has compiled the latest intelligence on Voldemort's whereabouts." She unrolled a large parchment map across the table, revealing the mountainous terrain of central Albania. Several areas glowed with a soft red light, indicating possible locations identified through magical and conventional intelligence gathering. "Our sources indicate increased magical activity in these regions," Amelia explained, tapping one glowing area. "Dark creatures gathering, local disappearances, magical anomalies consistent with the presence of a non-corporeal entity attempting to consolidate power." "And the snake?" Harry asked. "Is Nagini confirmed to be with him?" "Multiple witness accounts describe a large serpent accompanying a shadow that moves with purpose," Lupin replied, consulting a separate report. "The descriptions match what we know of Voldemort's wraith form and his familiar. So we mount an expedition," Sirius concluded. "Track him down, destroy the final Horcrux, and end Voldemort permanently." "It's not that simple," Snape interjected, his voice measured. "The Dark Lord, even in wraith form, possesses formidable magical awareness. A direct approach would alert him long before we came within striking distance." "Professor Snape is correct," Amelia agreed. "We need a strategy that allows us to approach undetected." "What about using me as bait?" Harry suggested quietly. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him in various states of alarm. "Absolutely not," Sirius declared immediately. "Hear me out," Harry insisted. "Voldemort has been obsessed with killing me since I was a baby. If he knew where I was, if he believed I was vulnerable, he would come himself rather than risk someone else failing." "Mr. Potter," McGonagall began, her voice strained, "while your courage is commendable, it's not about courage," Harry interrupted. "It's about practicality. We've spent months trying to locate him with limited success. Meanwhile, he's growing stronger. If we control the confrontation, choose the location, prepare our defenses, set the terms, we have a better chance than chasing him through Albanian forests." A thoughtful silence followed his argument. "The strategy has merit," Snape finally acknowledged, ignoring Sirius's glare. "However, the risk to Potter would be extreme." "Not if we plan properly," Harry countered. "Besides, I'm not suggesting I face him alone. I'd be surrounded by all of you, in a location we've prepared with every possible protection." "Where would this confrontation take place?" Amelia asked, her expression suggesting she was at least considering the idea. "Hogwarts," Harry answered without hesitation. "Impossible," McGonagall objected. "I cannot endanger the students, during summer break," Harry clarified. "The castle will be nearly empty in 2 weeks. And Hogwarts has the strongest existing wards in Britain," wards we've now purified of Dumbledore's modifications. The group exchanged considering glances, the strategic advantages becoming apparent despite their reservations. There's another factor to consider, Hermione spoke up. According to our research, Voldemort's wraith requires significant magical energy to maintain corporeal influence, like possessing Quirrell or controlling the basilisk through Ginny. Without a proper body or a host, his ability to affect the physical world is limited. Meaning? Bill prompted. Meaning he's vulnerable in his current state, she explained. If we can prevent him from possessing anyone or anything, his options for attack are constrained. And if we can separate him from Nagini before he realizes our true purpose. Harry added, the plan taking shape. We could destroy the final Horcrux, then confront the Wraith directly, Lupin finished. Theoretically sound, but extraordinarily dangerous in execution. The discussion continued for hours, dissecting every aspect of the proposed strategy, identifying risks and countermeasures. By the time they emerged from Gringotts into the fading afternoon light, a framework had been established, Operation Basilisk's Bane, as Sirius had dubbed it with grim humor. We have 12 days to prepare, Amelia summarized as they parted ways outside the bank. Every detail must be perfect. The smallest oversight could be catastrophic. We've destroyed 5 Horcruxes, Harry reminded her. We've overcome Dumbledore's compulsions and rebuilt ourselves stronger than before. We can do this. Your confidence is either inspiring or terrifying, she replied with a small smile. Perhaps both. As Harry walked away with Sirius and Snape flanking him like vigilant guardians, he felt the weight of the coming confrontation settling across his shoulders. For the first time since this journey began, the end was in sight, the possibility of a life beyond the shadows of both Dumbledore's manipulation and Voldemort's threat. If they survived the next 2 weeks. Again, Snape instructed, his voice betraying no fatigue despite the late hour. Harry nodded, sweat dampening his shirt as he resumed the complex mental exercise. In the specialized training room McGonagall had provided, a modified classroom in Hogwarts East Wing, he stood at the center of a pentagram of power, surrounded by objects enchanted to attack his mental shields at random intervals. This was his 6th consecutive hour of training today, following 4 hours with Flitwick on battlefield charms and 3 with McGonagall on environmental transfiguration. His magical reserves, though vastly expanded since the removal of Dumbledore's suppression compulsions, were approaching their limits. A silver dart shot toward him from his left. Without conscious thought, Harry erected a mental barrier, causing the dart to dissolve into harmless sparkles upon impact. Simultaneously, he maintained the complicated visualization Snape had taught him, a multi-layered mental landscape designed to trap and confuse any foreign consciousness attempting to invade his mind. Better, Snape acknowledged as Harry deflected 3 more projectiles in rapid succession. You're anticipating rather than merely reacting now. It's getting easier to hold multiple defenses simultaneously, Harry replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. A skill that will prove essential when facing the Dark Lord, Snape reminded him. His methods of mental attack are creative. A sudden wave of pressure crashed against Harry's defenses, not from the training devices but from Snape himself, a surprise attack meant to test Harry's resistance when distracted. Harry grimaced but held firm, reflecting the probe back toward its source with a technique he'd only recently mastered. Snape staggered slightly, taken aback by the force of the rebound. Impressive, he conceded, a rare compliment. Perhaps we should conclude for today. You'll need adequate rest before tomorrow's session with Moody. The mention of the grizzled ex-Auror made Harry wince. Alastair Mad-Eye Moody had volunteered to train Harry in combat situational awareness, and his methods were notoriously brutal, though undeniably effective. As Harry deactivated the training pentagon, the door opened to admit Sirius and Lupin, both looking grave. What's happened? Harry asked immediately, recognizing their expressions. Dumbledore's been sighted, Sirius replied without preamble. In Prague, meeting with the leader of the Eastern European Magical Consortium. Gathering allies? Snape surmised, his expression darkening. Or resources, Lupin suggested. The consortium controls several ancient magical artifacts that could theoretically be used for long-distance magical influence. Harry absorbed this news, a chill running down his spine despite the room's warmth. Does this change our timeline? Not yet, Sirius assured him. Amelia has dispatched a team to monitor the situation, but all intelligence suggests Dumbledore is unaware of our plan regarding Voldemort. We cannot assume anything where Albus is concerned, Snape cautioned. His information network was extensive and not all his agents have been identified. Which is why we're implementing additional security measures, Lupin explained. From now until Operation Basilisk's Bane concludes, all communications will use the enhanced Patronus method Bill developed, and all personnel will undergo identification verification at each checkpoint. What about the bait? Harry asked, using the operational term for his own role with deliberate detachment. Do we need to modify that aspect of the plan? The three men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that Harry couldn't quite interpret. We've been discussing that, Sirius admitted. With Dumbledore active again, the risk profile has changed. He might attempt to interfere if he learns what we're planning. Or attempt to recapture me, Harry concluded flatly. To restart his harmonic focus project. It's a possibility we must consider, Snape confirmed. Which is why we've developed this. He withdrew a small vial containing a swirling silver-blue potion from his robes, placing it carefully on the nearby table. What is it? Harry asked, eyeing the mysteriously shifting liquid. A magical identity shield, Lupin explained. A new development from the Unspeakables, building on the protective enchantments used by their field operatives. It temporarily obscures your magical signature, Sirius added. Anyone attempting to locate you through magical means would find their spells misdirected or confused. It doesn't make you untraceable, but it creates significant interference. Harry studied the potion thoughtfully. How would this affect the plan? If Voldemort can't sense my magical signature, we would need to provide alternative bait, Snape said. Something he would recognize as unmistakably connected to you, but which doesn't require your actual magical presence to be detectable. The blood quill, Harry realized, referencing an artifact recovered from Dumbledore's hidden chamber, a specialized quill that had been used to collect Harry's blood during his first year under the guise of a medical examination. Precisely, Snape confirmed. Combined with certain rituals, it would create a magical beacon Voldemort could not ignore, a signature he would believe to be you, vulnerable and accessible. While the real you remains protected by the identity shield, Sirius concluded. Giving us a critical advantage when he appears. Harry considered the revised strategy, analyzing its strengths and weaknesses with a clarity that still occasionally surprised him, another benefit of having Dumbledore's intelligence-suppressing compulsions removed. It could work, he decided. But timing will be crucial. The potion's duration? 6 hours at maximum potency, with gradual degradation over the subsequent 6 hours, Snape replied. Sufficient for our purposes, assuming all goes according to plan. Which it won't, Harry said with a wry smile, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. But it gives us more flexibility than we had before. Your strategic thinking has improved dramatically, Lupin observed, a hint of pride in his voice. I've had good teachers, Harry acknowledged, including all three men in his glance. Over the past months, each had contributed uniquely to his development, Sirius with his unconventional dueling techniques, Lupin with his encyclopedic knowledge of defensive magic, and Snape with his unparalleled expertise in the mental arts and magical theory. Rest, Snape instructed, ending the moment before it could become sentimental. Tomorrow's training begins at 7, and Moody is not known for his patience. As Harry departed for his quarters, a private room adjacent to Sirius's in the renovated Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's suite, he reflected on how fundamentally his relationship with authority figures had transformed. Where once he had instinctively distrusted adults, courtesy of both the Dursleys' abuse and Dumbledore's carefully constructed compulsions, he now found himself part of a genuine collaborative effort, his input valued despite his youth. The thought brought both satisfaction and a lingering sadness for the years lost to manipulation. But as Snape had repeatedly emphasized during their training sessions, regret was a distraction one could ill afford in magical combat. The past was immutable, only the present moment and future choices remained within their control. With that philosophy firmly in mind, Harry turned his thoughts to the challenges ahead, the final Horcrux, the confrontation with Voldemort, and the ever-present threat of Dumbledore's interference. Sleep came quickly, his exhausted body overriding his active mind, but even in dreams, strategies and contingencies continued to form. The Great Hall of Hogwarts had been transformed. Where students usually gathered for meals, an intricate ritual circle now covered the stone floor, stretching nearly 30 feet in diameter. Ancient runes pulsed with golden light along its perimeter, while at 5 equidistant points stood braziers of silver, each containing a different magical substance prepared to activate at the critical moment. Harry surveyed the preparations from the entrance, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. 2 weeks of intensive preparation had culminated in this moment. In less than an hour, they would initiate the ritual designed to lure Voldemort and Nagini into their carefully prepared trap. Final security sweep complete, Kingsley reported, approaching with Moody at his side. All access points secured, wards at maximum strength, and teams in position throughout the castle. Any sign of our secondary concern? Harry asked, using the agreed-upon code for Dumbledore. Nothing, Moody growled, his magical eye swiveling independently of his normal one. But that doesn't mean he's not watching. Constant vigilance. Always, Harry agreed, having adopted much of the Exorer's paranoid but practical mindset during their training sessions. Status of the blood quill. Prepared according to Snape's specifications, Kingsley confirmed. Once activated, its magical signature will broadcast your presence, or what appears to be your presence, with enough power to be detected even in Albania. And the identity shield potion? Ready for ingestion 30 minutes before ritual initiation, came Snape's voice as he entered from a side chamber, carrying a rack of carefully labeled potions. Along with the other protective measures we've discussed. Harry nodded, mentally reviewing the extensive list of magical defenses, physical precautions, and strategic countermeasures they had developed. Every contingency had been anticipated, every weakness addressed to the best of their considerable combined abilities. Yet anxiety lingered, a persistent whisper that no amount of preparation could completely silence. They were deliberately summoning the most dangerous dark wizard of the age into the heart of Hogwarts. Even diminished to wraith form, even missing 5/6 of his soul, Voldemort remained a formidable threat. Second thoughts? Sirius asked quietly, appearing at Harry's side. Healthy caution, Harry corrected. According to Moody, second thoughts get you killed, but healthy caution keeps you alive. Sirius chuckled despite the tension. You've been spending too much time with that paranoid old bastard. Not enough, if you ask him. Their banter was interrupted as more participants arrived, Hermione and Ron entering with Luna and Neville, all four looking solemn but determined. Though they would not participate directly in the confrontation, their roles in maintaining the castle's defenses were essential. Runestone network is active, Hermione reported crisply. All 37 nodes responding correctly. Greenhouse defenses ready, Neville added. The venomous tentacula and devil's snare are primed to intercept anything attempting to enter through the grounds. Early warning system functioning, Luna continued in her dreamy voice, though her eyes were sharp and focused. The Nargles are properly aligned to detect magical disturbances. And the twins have finished setting the corridor traps, Ron concluded. Anyone trying to navigate the castle without authorization will get more than they bargained for. Harry felt a surge of pride in his friends. Each had grown remarkably in the months since their liberation from Dumbledore's compulsions, developing their natural talents and abilities in ways that would have been impossible under the former headmaster's restrictive influence. It's time, McGonagall announced, entering with Bill Weasley and Amelia Bones. Everyone to their positions. The Great Hall quickly organized into the predetermined formation. At the center of the ritual circle, Bill placed the blood quill on a small pedestal, carefully aligning it with the cardinal points. Surrounding this, 12 witches and wizards took their places at specific points corresponding to magical nodes within the castle's foundation. Harry moved to his position just outside the main circle, visible to those within the hall but strategically placed for both protection and tactical advantage. Sirius stood to his right, Snape to his left, with Lupin completing their protective triangle behind him. "The identity shield," Snape murmured, handing Harry the vial of silver-blue potion. Harry uncorked it, the liquid catching the light like captured moonbeams. "Bottoms up," he muttered, then swallowed the contents in a single gulp. The effect was immediate and disconcerting. A sensation like cool mist spread from his core to his extremities, temporarily obscuring his perception of his own magic. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't feel the familiar warmth of his magical core, then it returned, muted, distant, as though viewed through frosted glass. "How does it feel?" Sirius asked, watching him closely. "Strange," Harry admitted. "Like I'm magically muffled. Is it working?" Snape cast a quick diagnostic spell, studying the results with a satisfied nod. "Perfectly. Your magical signature is now effectively scrambled to external detection." "Then we begin," McGonagall declared, taking her position at the head of the ritual circle. What followed was a complex magical procedure unlike anything Harry had previously witnessed. Bill led the incantation, his voice steady as he recited ancient words that seemed to resonate with the castle itself. The other participants joined at specific intervals, their combined magic visibly manifesting as streams of colored light flowing toward the central pedestal. The blood quill began to glow, first red, then an intense, pulsating white that grew steadily brighter. Harry felt a peculiar tugging sensation despite the identity shield, a distant echo of the quill's connection to his blood. "First phase complete," Bill announced after precisely 17 minutes. Initiating the summoning beacon. The quill rose from its pedestal, hovering several feet above the floor. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, it emitted a blinding flash of light that momentarily filled the entire hall. When Harry's vision cleared, the quill had transformed into a pulsing orb of golden energy. "Now we wait," Amelia stated, maintaining her position within the circle. "The beacon has been activated. If our intelligence is correct, Voldemort will detect it within minutes." "How long before he could potentially arrive?" Harry asked. "Unknown," Snape replied. "It depends on his current strength and means of travel. Anywhere from 1 hour to 12, based on our best estimates. Then we maintain readiness in shifts," McGonagall decided. "First rotation remains in position for 2 hours, then exchanges with the second team. Mr. Potter, you should," she never finished the sentence. A violent tremor shook the castle, the stones beneath their feet vibrating as though in terror. The magical orb that had been the blood quill flared with sudden intensity, then turned a deep, malevolent crimson. "That's not possible," Bill exclaimed, his scarred face pale with shock. "He couldn't have responded this quickly unless he was already nearby," Snape finished grimly. "The Dark Lord has been closer than we realized." Another tremor, stronger than the first. The castle's ancient wards flared visibly, lines of blue-white energy racing across the walls and ceiling as Hogwarts defenses activated autonomously. "He's testing the boundaries," Moody barked, his magical eye spinning wildly. "Looking for weakness in the ward structure." "There is none," McGonagall stated with absolute certainty. "The purification ritual we performed last month ensured that." "Unless," Harry began, a terrible suspicion forming. The main doors to the Great Hall burst open, admitting a breathless Fred Weasley. "Something's wrong with the astronomy tower defenses. The wards there are fluctuating, creating a potential entry point." "That's not possible," Bill objected. "I checked those wards myself this morning." "Someone has tampered with them since," Snape concluded, his expression hardening. "Someone with intimate knowledge of Hogwarts' magical architecture." Understanding dawned simultaneously across multiple faces. "Dumbledore," Sirius growled. He's here. The implications cascaded through Harry's mind like falling dominoes. Their carefully constructed plan had just encountered not one but two deadly complications. Voldemort was closer than anticipated, and Dumbledore had apparently decided to involve himself in the confrontation. New plan, Harry announced, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Bill, Hermione, reinforce the astronomy tower wards immediately. Kingsley, take your team and secure the tower physically. Luna, activate the secondary detection grid in case Dumbledore's already inside the castle. His decisive commands, delivered with calm authority that would have been impossible months earlier, galvanized the group into action. As people rushed to their assignments, Harry turned to his three protectors. We need to assume Dumbledore and Voldemort will both reach the Great Hall. The question is whether they'll arrive separately or together. Separately would be preferable, Lupin observed grimly. Facing both simultaneously would stretch even our extensive preparations. Then we need to delay one while dealing with the other, Harry decided. Voldemort is the priority, the snake needs to be destroyed before we can end him permanently. Agreed, Snape said, his dark eyes calculating. I suggest we proceed with the original plan regarding the Dark Lord but establish a secondary defensive perimeter specifically attuned to Albus's magical signature. Can we do that quickly enough? Sirius questioned. With the right foundation, yes. Snape turned to McGonagall. Minerva, the headmaster's seal, you've fully claimed it since Albus's flight. She nodded sharply. Completely. The castle recognizes me as headmistress now, not merely an acting substitute. Then you can use the seal to temporarily designate Albus as an intruder within the castle's recognition matrix, Snape explained. It won't stop him, but it will slow his progress significantly as the castle itself resists his presence. Brilliant, Harry acknowledged. Do it, Professor. As McGonagall hurried to implement this strategy, another tremor shook the castle, more focused this time, centered on the Great Hall itself. The crimson orb pulsed faster, its light taking on an almost liquid quality. He's found us, Moody announced unnecessarily. Positioning for direct approach. Everyone to battle stations, Amelia commanded, her voice magically amplified to reach all teams throughout the castle. This is not a drill. Primary target approaching the Great Hall. Secondary target detected near the astronomy tower. Harry felt a strange calm descend as he moved to his designated position. The months of training, the careful planning, the strategic preparation, all of it crystallized into a singular focus. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just his fate, but potentially that of the entire wizarding world. Harry, Sirius said quietly beside him. Whatever happens, I know, Harry interrupted with a small smile. Family, right? Sirius's eyes shimmered briefly. Family, he confirmed gruffly. The orb's pulsations accelerated to a near-continuous glow. The air in the Great Hall grew heavy, charged with magical energy that raised goosebumps along Harry's arms despite the identity shield potion. Incoming, someone shouted as the orb suddenly exploded in a shower of crimson droplets. Where it had been, a swirling vortex of darkness formed, expanding rapidly until it reached the size of a doorway. From within this unnatural portal emerged a massive serpent, Nagini, her scales gleaming with an oily iridescence that suggested magical enhancement. Behind her came a figure that barely resembled anything human, a wraith-like form composed of shadow and malice, vaguely man-shaped but lacking solid substance. Red eyes gleamed from the approximation of a face, scanning the hall with calculating hatred. Potter, the wraith hissed, its voice simultaneously within their ears and inside their minds. How considerate of you to arrange this reunion. Harry stepped forward, positioning himself precisely as they had rehearsed. Hello, Tom. You're looking insubstantial these days. The wraith's form rippled with rage at the casual use of his birth name. Impudent child. I sensed your blood, your essence. How eager you must be to die. Actually, Harry replied conversationally, I'm quite interested in living. It's you who's been hovering in that awkward state between life and death. Must be exhausting. As he spoke, Harry was acutely aware of the strategic movements occurring around the hall. Specialized teams were maneuvering into position to separate Nagini from her master, the critical first step in their plan. Your pathetic attempts at bravery cannot mask your fear, Voldemort's wraith declared. I sense it beneath your words, the knowledge that you face a power beyond your comprehension. Oh, I comprehend it, Harry countered. Just as I comprehend how much weaker you've become since I destroyed your diary. And the ring. And the diadem. And the locket. And the cup. The effect of these words was immediate and dramatic. The wraith's form contracted violently, its red eyes flaring with shock and fury. Nagini hissed, sensing her master's distress, her massive body coiling protectively around the insubstantial figure. Impossible, Voldemort seethed, his mental voice sharp with disbelief. Quite possible, Harry corrected. Your Horcruxes are gone, Tom. All except one. His gaze shifted pointedly to Nagini. Understanding and rage twisted the wraith's features into something barely recognizable as human. Kill him. Voldemort commanded, and Nagini launched forward with supernatural speed. This was the moment they had prepared for. As the massive serpent struck, multiple events occurred simultaneously. Bill and two other curse-breakers activated the containment runes embedded in the floor, causing a barrier of golden light to spring up, separating Nagini from Voldemort's wraith. Snape, Sirius, and Lupin cast a triangulated spell sequence that momentarily solidified the wraith, preventing it from dissipating or possessing anyone nearby. And from the shadows at the edge of the hall, Neville Longbottom stepped forward, wielding the sword of Gryffindor that had been retrieved from the Sorting Hat using an ancient rite McGonagall had uncovered. Nagini sensed the trap too late. As she twisted midair, attempting to redirect her strike, Neville swung the sword in a perfect arc, his expression utterly focused. The goblin-forged blade, imbued with basilisk venom from Harry's second year, connected with the serpent's neck just behind her head. A scream of pure anguish erupted from Voldemort as Nagini's head separated from her body. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, sizzling where it touched the stone floor. The serpent's decapitated body thrashed wildly for several seconds before falling still, a dark mist rising from the corpse, the final Horcrux destroyed. Now! Harry shouted, and the full ritual circle activated. Streams of magic from 12 points converged on Voldemort's wraith, which was still partially solidified from the triangulated spell. The combined power formed a containment field of extraordinary strength, designed specifically to prevent the wraith from escaping. What is this magic? Voldemort demanded, his mental voice laced with the first hints of genuine fear. What have you done? Something Dumbledore never anticipated, Harry replied, stepping closer to the containment field. We've created a soul trap, designed to hold what remains of your fractured spirit until it can be properly dispatched. The wraith thrashed against its magical prison, but the containment held firm. You cannot destroy me. Even without my Horcruxes, I am Lord Voldemort. I have gone further than any wizard in history toward conquering death. And yet, here you are, Harry observed calmly. Trapped and diminished, less than a ghost but unable to move on. I almost pity you. Rage contorted the wraith's features. You know nothing of my power, boy. I will return, as I always have. There are other ways, other rituals, not for you, came a new voice from the entrance to the great hall. Not anymore, Tom. All heads turned to see Albus Dumbledore standing in the doorway, his normally twinkling blue eyes cold and hard as he surveyed the scene. He wore formal robes of midnight blue embroidered with silver symbols, and his long beard was neatly trimmed, a far cry from his disheveled appearance when he had fled Hogwarts months earlier. Albus, McGonagall acknowledged tensely, her wand never wavering from its focus on the containment field. Minerva, Dumbledore returned with a slight nod. You've done impressive work in my absence. Though I confess, this is not the outcome I had envisioned for young Harry's confrontation with Tom. Your envisioned outcomes no longer concern us, Snape stated coldly. Your presence here is unwelcome and unnecessary. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to his former potions master, a hint of sadness crossing his features. Severus. I see the healers at St. Mungo's have been thorough in their work. A pity. Your dedication to Lily's memory was such a useful tool. You speak of people as tools and expect us to welcome you back. Sirius growled, positioning himself protectively near Harry. I speak practical truth, Sirius, Dumbledore replied mildly. In a world of dark wizards and existential threats, certain compromises are necessary for the greater good. There it is, Harry said quietly. Your favorite justification. The greater good. Dumbledore turned his attention fully to Harry, studying him with clinical interest. You've grown, Harry. Developed beyond my projections. I admit, I underestimated the speed with which you would recover from the necessary controls I had placed upon you. Necessary? Harry repeated incredulously. 34 compulsions. Memory modifications. Ability suppression. Isolating me with abusive relatives. How was any of that necessary? To prevent precisely this scenario, Dumbledore replied, gesturing toward the contained wraith of Voldemort, who watched the exchange with calculating interest. Your confrontation with Tom was meant to occur under controlled circumstances, at the proper time, with the proper guidance. You mean with me as your sacrificial lamb, Harry corrected. Your harmonic focus for re-engineering magical society. Surprise flashed briefly across Dumbledore's face. You've accessed my private records. Impressive. Though I fear you've misinterpreted my intentions. We interpreted them perfectly, Hermione countered, stepping forward despite Ron's restraining hand. We found everything, the journals, the planning matrices, the generational manipulation charts. Your 50-year plan to reshape magic itself. For the benefit of all, Dumbledore insisted. To prevent the cyclical rise of Dark Lords, to create a sustainable magical civilization capable of eventually rejoining the Muggle world without catastrophe. Yes, individual sacrifices were required, but the ultimate goal was still wrong, Harry interrupted firmly. You decided for everyone, without consent. You played God with people's lives, personalities, abilities, even their children. You're no better than Voldemort. You just chose a different method of control. The wraith of Voldemort laughed, a chilling sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the mind. The boy speaks truth, Dumbledore. We are not so different, you and I. Both seeking to remake the world according to our vision. Be silent, Tom, Dumbledore commanded sharply. You sought power for its own sake, dominance for your personal glory. My vision was always for the collective good. As defined by you alone, McGonagall noted bitterly. Without consultation or consensus. Because consensus would never have been achieved, Dumbledore countered. The wizarding world is too fractured, too entrenched in outdated traditions and petty politics to recognize what must be done for long-term survival. So you appointed yourself benevolent dictator, Sirius summarized. Making choices for everyone else because clearly, you knew best. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I had hoped for understanding, if not agreement. But I see that won't be possible, not yet. Perhaps in time, when the emotional wounds have healed, you'll recognize the necessity of my approach. Never, Harry stated flatly. And you still haven't explained why you're here now. How did you know about our plan to trap Voldemort? I have my sources, Dumbledore replied enigmatically. And while your initiative is commendable, the method you've chosen for Tom's final dispatch is flawed. The soul trap you've created will not hold indefinitely. It doesn't need to, Bill countered. It only needs to last until the dissolution ritual is complete. Ah, but there lies your error. Dumbledore stepped further into the hall, his movement causing several wands to track him warily. The ritual you've adapted from the Gringotts texts has a critical weakness when applied to a soul fragment as damaged as Tom's. It may appear to work initially, but the remnant will simply disperse temporarily before reconstituting elsewhere. A troubled silence followed this assertion as the ritual team exchanged concerned glances. Even Voldemort's wraith seemed to take renewed interest, the red eyes gleaming with malicious hope. "Why should we believe you?" Harry asked directly. "You've lied about everything else." "I have never lied about magical theory, Harry," Dumbledore corrected gently. "Obfuscated, redirected, selectively educated, yes. But never falsified core magical principles. The ritual will fail. I can demonstrate the theoretical error if you wish." "That won't be necessary," came Luna's dreamy voice from nearby. She had been silently observing the containment field, her head tilted as though listening to something no one else could hear. "He's right about the ritual. The Nargles show the discontinuity in the energy pattern." Harry trusted Luna's magical perception implicitly. If she said there was a flaw, then there was. "What do you suggest, then?" he asked Dumbledore, keeping his tone neutral. "A modified approach," Dumbledore replied. "One that requires the combined effort of 3 specific magical signatures, mine, yours, and, ironically, Tom's own. A triangulation of power that will properly dissolve what remains without possibility of reconstitution. And conveniently places you at the center of the final act," Snape observed suspiciously. "With access to Potter's unshielded magic. A necessary positioning for the ritual to function," Dumbledore acknowledged. "But I give you my word that I will attempt no compulsions or controls during the process." "Your word means nothing," Sirius spat. "Not anymore. Perhaps not to you, Sirius. But I believe Harry understands the gravity of the current situation. Tom must be properly dispatched, and time is of the essence. The containment field, impressive though it is already showing signs of stress." Harry glanced at the magical barrier surrounding Voldemort's wraith. Sure enough, small fluctuations were visible in the golden light, tiny ripples that suggested the field was being tested from within. What exactly would this triangulation ritual require? Harry asked cautiously. "Harry, you can't seriously be considering," Sirius began. "I'm considering all options," Harry interrupted firmly. "We need to end Voldemort permanently. If our current method is flawed. A direct magical connection between the 3 of us," Dumbledore explained. "You and I would channel our magic through specific formulations while Tom's essence is held in the containment field. The interaction of these 3 magical signatures, properly aligned, would create a cascade effect that unravels what remains of his soul structure. And leaves Harry vulnerable to whatever influence you might attempt to exert," Lupin pointed out. "A risk, certainly," Dumbledore conceded. "But one that must be weighed against the alternative, Tom eventually breaking free, however weakened, to begin the cycle anew." The great hall fell silent as the impossible choice presented itself. Trust the man who had manipulated Harry's entire life, or risk Voldemort somehow escaping to terrorize the wizarding world again. "There is a third option," Snape stated suddenly, his dark eyes focused intently on the containment field. "One that maintains the triangulation principle without exposing Potter to direct magical connection with Albus." "Explain," McGonagall prompted. "A proxy channeler," Snape continued. "Someone to stand in Potter's position in the triangle, receiving his magic indirectly through a controlled conduit, then directing it into the triangulation matrix." "That would require someone with extraordinary magical control," Dumbledore objected. "And a pre-existing magical connection to Harry strong enough to sustain the transfer. Someone like a magical guardian who swore a formal oath," Snape suggested pointedly. Harry's eyes widened in understanding. "The oath you took on my first birthday." "Precisely," Snape confirmed. "The connection established by that oath remains intact and provides a suitable conduit for this purpose." Dumbledore studied Snape with newfound interest. "You've recovered those memories. Impressive. The oath might indeed provide sufficient connection, though the risk to you would be considerable, Severus." "I am aware," Snape replied coldly. But unlike you, I take my oaths seriously. Decision crystallized in Harry's mind. We do it Snape's way. The proxy triangulation. Harry, Dumbledore began. This isn't a negotiation, Harry cut him off. Either we do it with Snape as proxy, or we take our chances with our original ritual. Dumbledore's expression shifted subtly, calculation replacing conciliation. Very well. The proxy method can work, with proper preparation. We should begin immediately, while the containment field remains stable. The next 30 minutes passed in a flurry of controlled activity. Under Dumbledore's guidance, verified at each step by Bill, Hermione, and Luna's combined expertise, a triangulation matrix was established around Voldemort's containment field. Dumbledore took position at one point, Snape at another, with the third point initially empty, awaiting Harry's channeled magic. The connection ritual first, Dumbledore instructed. Harry, you and Severus must establish the conduit before we can proceed with the main triangulation. Harry approached Snape, who had removed his outer robes and rolled up his left sleeve, revealing the faded dark mark, a reminder of his complicated past. Are you certain about this? Harry asked quietly. Dumbledore said the risk to you would be considerable. I am certain, Snape replied simply. This is my choice, freely made. Perhaps the first truly free choice I've made regarding you since that Halloween night. The simple sincerity in these words affected Harry deeply. He nodded once, unable to articulate his gratitude adequately. The connection ritual was elegant in its simplicity. Harry placed his right hand over Snape's heart, while Snape placed his right hand over Harry's. With their left hands, they each gripped their wands, touching the tips together. Snape began the incantation, his deep voice steady as he recited the Latin phrases that would activate and amplify the dormant magical guardian bond. Harry felt the moment the connection fully established, a warm current flowing between them, distinct from his own magic yet harmonious with it. Through this link, he could sense aspects of Snape's magical nature, the disciplined precision, the tightly controlled power, the unexpected depth of protective instinct. It is done, Snape announced, his normally impassive expression momentarily revealing something akin to wonder at the fully awakened guardian bond. Excellent, Dumbledore acknowledged. Severus, take your position. Harry, move to the outer circle where Bill has prepared your channeling focus. As they moved to their respective positions, Harry became acutely aware of Voldemort's wraith watching the proceedings with calculating hatred. The red eyes tracked every movement, seeking weaknesses, opportunities for escape or sabotage. The creature suspects something, Luna murmured as Harry passed her on his way to the channeling focus. It's gathering what power it has left for one attempt at breaking free. When? Harry asked tersely. When the triangulation begins, she predicted. When the energies are in flux. Harry nodded his understanding. Tell Moody and Kingsley. Have them ready with the secondary containment measures. From his position at the channeling focus, a specially prepared crystal designed to direct his magic to Snape, Harry could observe the entire ritual area. Dumbledore stood tall and straight at his triangle point, his wand held precisely at the prescribed angle. Snape mirrored this posture at his own point, his dark eyes focused intently on the containment field. Between them, Voldemort's wraith hovered, its form shifting restlessly within the golden barrier. On my mark, Dumbledore called, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. 3, 2, 1, begin. Harry focused his magic into the crystal before him, visualizing the power flowing through the guardian bond to Snape. Simultaneously, Dumbledore and Snape initiated their parts of the triangulation, sending precisely modulated magical currents toward the containment field. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where the three magical streams met the field, a vortex of swirling energy formed, drawing the wraith inexorably toward its center. Voldemort fought, his insubstantial form writhing in desperate resistance, but the pull was relentless. Something's wrong, Hermione called suddenly from her monitoring position. The magical frequencies are misaligned. Harry felt it too, a discordant vibration in the flow of energy that shouldn't have been present. He looked sharply at Dumbledore and saw what he feared. The old wizard was deliberately modifying his contribution to the triangulation, subtly but significantly altering the ritual. He's sabotaging it, Harry realized aloud. Kingsley, Moody, now. The two Aurors reacted instantly, casting powerful containment charms directed not at Voldemort, but at Dumbledore. The former headmaster's eyes widened in surprise as magical restraints materialized around him, but his surprise quickly gave way to a sad smile. Too late, I'm afraid, he announced calmly. The modification is already in progress. The vortex at the center of the triangulation began to change color, shifting from gold to a deep purple. The Wraith of Voldemort screamed, not in pain but in what sounded disconcertingly like triumph. What have you done? McGonagall demanded, advancing on Dumbledore with her wand raised. What was necessary, he replied simply. Tom cannot be allowed to simply dissolve into nothingness. He must be contained, controlled, harnessed for the greater purpose. Horror dawned on Harry's face as understanding clicked into place. You're not destroying him. You're capturing his essence, his power. For the Harmony Project, Dumbledore confirmed. Tom's magical signature, properly filtered and integrated, provides the perfect counterbalance to your own in the harmonic focus matrix. Together, they create the resonance frequency needed for widespread magical restructuring. You're insane, Sirius breathed. You'd risk Voldemort returning just to power your social engineering project? No risk, Dumbledore corrected. Complete certainty. The modified ritual will extract and purify Tom's magical essence while discarding the consciousness. The power without the personality, you might say. And what about me? Harry demanded. Where do I fit in your revised plan? Dumbledore's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine regret. I had hoped to bring you along willingly, Harry. To help you understand the necessity of my approach. But I see now that Severus and the others have turned you irrevocably against me. A pity, but not an insurmountable obstacle. The vortex pulsed violently, and Harry felt a sudden painful tugging through his connection to Snape, a drawing sensation that pulled at something essential within his magical core. What's happening? He gasped, struggling to maintain his focus on the crystal. The modified ritual is capturing both magical signatures simultaneously, Hermione realized, her analytical mind quickly grasping Dumbledore's strategy. He's extracting both Voldemort's essence and yours through the triangulation. Sever the connection. Lupin shouted to Harry. Cut off the channeling now. Harry tried to withdraw his magic from the crystal, but found himself unable to break the flow. I can't, he called back, panic rising. Something's locking it in place. Albus has anchored the connection, Snape reported grimly, his own face contorted with effort as he attempted to interrupt the ritual from his position. He anticipated our resistance. Dumbledore remained serene despite the magical restraints holding him. Please understand, this is necessary. The extraction process will not harm Harry permanently. Once his magical signature has been properly sampled and integrated into the harmonic focus, he will recover much of his power, though in a more balanced, controlled form. You would cripple him, Snape accused, his voice deadly. Diminish his magic to suit your design. I would harmonize him, Dumbledore corrected. As I would harmonize all magical beings, given time. A necessary rebalancing to ensure long-term stability. The vortex continued to grow, pulling more of Harry's magic through the connection. He felt himself weakening, his vision blurring at the edges as essential energy drained away. In that moment of desperation, clarity struck. Luna, he called out. The Nargles, can they see the pattern of the anchoring spell? Luna stepped closer to the triangulation matrix, her silvery eyes unfocused in that peculiar way that indicated she was perceiving magical patterns beyond normal vision. Yes, she confirmed after a moment. It's a modified Babylonian binding constellation, with 7 primary nodes and 3 hidden recursion points. Bill. Harry continued, fighting to remain conscious as more magic drained from him. The Egyptian counter for Babylonian bindings, would it work? Bill's scarred face lit with understanding. The Thoth reversal, yes, but it requires precise timing and specific focusing elements. We'd need sand from a pharaoh's tomb, blood freely given, and solar gold, Snape interrupted, having grasped the strategy. I have the first two in my potion supplies. The gold? My ring, Sirius volunteered immediately, holding up his hand to display the Black family signet. Pure gold infused with phoenix tears, should qualify as solar. Go. Harry urged, his voice weakening. Hurry. As Bill and Sirius raced to gather the necessary components, the situation in the Great Hall deteriorated further. The vortex had grown large enough to encompass Voldemort's wraith completely, the once humanoid form dissolving into streamers of dark energy that flowed toward Dumbledore's position in the triangle. Simultaneously, visible tendrils of emerald light, Harry's magic, were being drawn through Snape's unwilling conduit into the same vortex. You cannot stop what has already begun, Dumbledore stated, though his confident tone had faltered slightly. The extraction is nearly complete. Perhaps, McGonagall acknowledged, her wand trained steadily on her former friend and mentor. But what happens afterward remains to be determined. You would oppose the greater harmony? Dumbledore asked, genuine puzzlement in his voice. After all you've seen of magical conflict, of the damage wrought by unchecked power? I oppose the methodology, Albus, not the goal, she replied firmly. True harmony cannot be imposed through manipulation and control. It must be chosen freely, developed organically through education and understanding. A pleasant theory, Dumbledore sighed. But one that history has disproven repeatedly. Left to their own devices, magical beings inevitably trend toward conflict and dominance hierarchies. Only through careful, sustained intervention can this cycle be broken. Their philosophical debate was interrupted by Bill's return, his arms laden with the ritual components. Sirius followed closely, his family ring already removed and ready for use. The counter-ritual must be performed simultaneously at all 3 points of the triangle, Bill explained quickly, distributing the materials. Minerva, you'll need to take Dumbledore's position while maintaining the restraints on him. I am capable of both, McGonagall confirmed grimly. As they hurriedly prepared the Thoth reversal, Harry felt his connection to his magic growing dangerously thin. The drain had progressed to a critical point, if not reversed soon, he might lose access to his magical core permanently. Snape, he called weakly, fighting to remain conscious. If this doesn't work, the Guardian Oath, release yourself from it. Snape's head snapped up, his dark eyes locking with Harry's across the distance. Never, he stated flatly. I will not abandon you again. The simple declaration, delivered without sentiment but with absolute conviction, gave Harry a surge of renewed determination. He forced himself to focus, to hold on to the remaining threads of his magic with everything he had. Ready. Bill announced, having completed the hasty preparations. On my mark, all 3 points activate simultaneously. 3, 2, 1. Now. McGonagall, Snape, and Bill, standing in for Harry, each performed the complex wand movement of the Thoth reversal while speaking the ancient Egyptian incantation. The sand from a pharaoh's tomb rose in spiraling columns at each point, infused with the freely given blood and illuminated by the solar gold held at the apex of each spiral. For a terrible moment, nothing seemed to happen. The vortex continued drawing Harry's magic and Voldemort's essence, the process apparently unaffected by their counter-ritual. Then, with a sound like glass shattering at a distance, the entire magical construct shuddered. Fracture lines of brilliant white light appeared within the purple vortex, spreading rapidly across its surface. Dumbledore's expression changed from confident to concerned as he felt his modified ritual beginning to unravel. No, he exclaimed, struggling against McGonagall's restraints. You don't understand what you're doing. The harmonic potential will be lost. The fractures continued spreading, accelerating as they multiplied. With a final, thunderous crack, the entire triangulation matrix collapsed. The vortex imploded, releasing both Harry's magic and Voldemort's essence in a violent backlash of energy that knocked everyone in the Great Hall off their feet. Harry gasped as his magic rushed back into his core, not smoothly, but in a painful flood that overwhelmed his senses momentarily. When his vision cleared, he found himself lying on the stone floor, Sirius crouched protectively over him. "Harry? Harry? Can you hear me?" "Yes," he managed, his voice hoarse. "What happened to Voldemort?" "See for yourself," Sirius replied grimly, helping Harry to sit up. Where the containment field had been, a chaotic swirl of dark energy was rapidly disintegrating, Voldemort's essence, released from Dumbledore's attempted capture but unable to maintain cohesion without the Horcruxes anchoring it to the material world. As Harry watched, the dark mist dissolved into ever smaller particles, finally disappearing entirely with a faint, distant wail. "Is he gone?" Harry asked, hardly daring to believe. "Yes," Luna confirmed, her dreamy voice unusually definitive. "The pattern is broken completely. He has moved beyond the veil, as he should have done years ago." "And Dumbledore?" Sirius's expression darkened. "Still very much with us, unfortunately." Across the hall, Dumbledore stood surrounded by Aurors, his hands bound with specialized magic-suppressing manacles. His robes were singed, his beard slightly askew, but his bearing remained dignified despite his circumstances. "What happens to him now?" Harry asked as Sirius helped him to his feet. "Azkaban, pending trial," Amelia Bones replied, approaching them. "The charges are extensive, from illegal use of compulsion magic to conspiracy, endangerment of minors, and attempted magical extraction without consent. Given the severity and scale of his crimes, he will likely remain imprisoned for the remainder of his life." Harry studied the man who had controlled so much of his existence, the architect of manipulation who had shaped an entire society according to his vision of the greater good. Dumbledore met his gaze steadily, neither apologetic nor defiant, merely watchful. "I'd like to speak with him," Harry decided. "Before they take him away." "Harry, that's not necessary," Sirius objected. "You owe him nothing, certainly not closure." "It's not for him," Harry explained quietly. "It's for me. I need to understand, or at least try to." After a moment's hesitation, Sirius nodded. "All right. But I'm coming with you." They crossed the debris-strewn hall to where Dumbledore waited with his Auror guards. Up close, Harry could see the exhaustion in the old wizard's face, the slight tremor in his hands that suggested magical depletion. "Harry," Dumbledore acknowledged with a slight nod. "I am pleased to see you recovered from the extraction attempt. That speaks to your remarkable magical resilience." "Why?" Harry asked simply, ignoring the pleasantry. "All of it, the compulsions, the manipulations, the suppression of people's natural abilities. You could have used your influence to educate, to guide, to inspire. Instead, you chose control. Why?" Dumbledore considered the question with apparent sincerity. "Because education and guidance are slow, uncertain methods, vulnerable to corruption and resistance. I had seen firsthand the consequences of magical conflict, first with Grindelwald, then with Tom. The destruction, the loss of life, the exposure risk to Muggle society. I concluded that more direct intervention was necessary. But to manipulate people's very personalities," Harry pressed. "To decide who they could become, who they could love, what talents they could develop, how could you justify that level of control?" "The same way a healer justifies setting a broken bone," Dumbledore replied. "It causes immediate pain but prevents greater suffering later. Magical society is, fundamentally broken, Harry. The isolationism, the blood prejudice, the power disparities, the stagnant governmental structures, all of it trending inexorably toward collapse." "So you appointed yourself the healer of society," Sirius observed coldly. "Without consent, without oversight, without accountability." "Yes," Dumbledore acknowledged simply. "Because no existing structure could have accomplished what was necessary." "The Wisengamot?" Corrupt and self-interested. The Ministry. Bureaucratic and short-sighted. The ICW. Politically paralyzed by competing national interests. You still don't see it, do you? Harry realized, studying the former headmaster's calm certainty. The fundamental wrongness of what you did. You talk about healing society while violating the autonomy of every individual within it. What kind of society were you trying to create, where people's true selves were suppressed and redirected according to your blueprint? A harmonious one, Dumbledore answered without hesitation. One where magical extremes were moderated, where cooperation replaced competition, where collective welfare superseded individual ambition. A society of puppets, Harry concluded sadly. Dancing to strings you alone controlled. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I see we cannot reach understanding, at least not today. Perhaps in time, when emotions have cooled and consequences have unfolded, you will reconsider my methods in light of their intended outcomes. I doubt it, Harry replied honestly. But I do have one more question, was any of it real? The concern you showed for me, the guidance, the moments of connection, was that all just manipulation too? Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes, a brief vulnerability quickly masked. No, Harry. The affection was genuine, even as the purpose remained focused on the greater plan. I have always cared for you, even while shaping you toward necessary ends. Harry wasn't sure if this answer made things better or worse. The idea that Dumbledore had genuinely cared while simultaneously manipulating him created a cognitive dissonance he couldn't easily resolve. We're done here, he said finally, turning away. Goodbye, Professor. Farewell, Harry, Dumbledore replied softly. I hope you find the peace I sought but failed to achieve. As the Aurors led Dumbledore away, Harry felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief at Voldemort's final defeat, lingering anger at Dumbledore's manipulations, but also a profound sense of liberation. For the first time in his life, he stood truly free of external control, his future entirely his own to determine. Snape approached, moving somewhat stiffly after the magical backlash of the disrupted ritual. Potter, he acknowledged. Your magic appears to have returned intact. Thanks to you, Harry replied. And Bill, and everyone else who helped counter Dumbledore's extraction attempt. Snape inclined his head slightly. The Guardian Oath functioned as intended, though not precisely in the manner originally envisioned. Will it remain active? Harry asked, suddenly concerned that this newly recovered connection might dissolve now that the immediate crisis had passed. It will, Snape confirmed. Unless you wish it terminated. No, Harry said immediately. I'd like to keep it, if you're willing. It's a connection to my parents, to my past. And to you. Something softened briefly in Snape's normally impassive expression. Then it shall remain. As the immediate crisis response transitioned into recovery operations, Harry found himself drawn to the window overlooking the Hogwarts grounds. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the familiar landscape of the school that had been both prison and sanctuary throughout his young life. Hermione joined him there, her expression thoughtful. It's really over, isn't it? Both of them, Voldemort gone completely, Dumbledore facing justice. It seems unreal, Harry admitted. For so long, they were the two defining forces in my life, one trying to kill me, the other controlling me. And now? Now you get to decide who Harry Potter is, she finished for him. We all do, decide who we are, I mean. Without compulsions or manipulations. It's terrifying, Harry said with a small laugh. Exciting, but terrifying. That's how it should be, came Lupin's voice as he approached with Sirius. Growing into yourself is supposed to be a bit terrifying. It means you're doing it right. And you're not doing it alone, Sirius added, resting a hand on Harry's shoulder. None of us are. Harry looked around the great hall, taking in the people who had fought beside him, not because they were compelled to, but because they had chosen to. McGonagall directing the cleanup efforts with brisk efficiency. Neville carefully sheathing the sword of Gryffindor, standing taller and more confident than he ever had before. Luna explaining something incomprehensible to Bill, who listened with genuine interest rather than dismissal. Ron and the twins helping repair damaged sections of the floor, working together without their previously compelled friction. What happens now? Harry asked, turning back to Sirius and Lupin. With Hogwarts, with the Ministry, with everything Dumbledore affected? Rebuilding, Lupin replied simply. Not just structures, but systems. The investigation has revealed the full extent of Albus's influence, educational curricula, ministry policies, international relations, even economic structures. It will take years to identify and reform everything he manipulated. But it's already beginning, Sirius added more optimistically. Minerva has initiated a complete review of Hogwarts' educational approach, working with experts to create a more balanced, inclusive curriculum. Amelia is leading a similar overhaul at the Ministry. And St. Mungo's has established a permanent department dedicated to identifying and removing residual compulsions throughout the population, Hermione contributed. They're calling it the Autonomy Restoration Program. Harry nodded, absorbing this information. The scale of the recovery effort matched the scale of Dumbledore's original manipulation, society-wide, multi-generational, touching every aspect of magical life. It won't be easy, he acknowledged. Dumbledore spent 5 decades building his system of control. Dismantling it will take time. But unlike his approach, the rebuilding will be collaborative and transparent, Lupin pointed out. Already, international delegations are arriving to assist with the process and learn from what happened here to prevent similar manipulation elsewhere. And on a personal level? Harry asked, his thoughts turning to his own future now that both the prophecy and Dumbledore's harmonic focus plan had been rendered irrelevant. That's entirely up to you, Sirius grinned. Though I do have a suggestion, if you're interested. Always, Harry prompted curiously. Home first, Sirius decided. I've finished renovating Grimmauld Place, you wouldn't recognize it now. We could spend the summer there, just, being a family. Figure out the rest as we go. The simple proposal, so normal, so ordinary, affected Harry more deeply than any grand plans could have. A home. A family. Time to simply exist without prophecies or manipulations or world-saving responsibilities. I'd like that, he managed, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. As the conversation continued around him, Harry felt something settle inside him, not an ending, but a beginning. The foundations of Dumbledore's control scheme had indeed collapsed completely, but from the ruins, something new was emerging. Something authentic, built on genuine connection and freely chosen paths rather than manipulation and control. Whatever came next, it would be their story to write, not as puppets dancing to predetermined strings, but as authors of their own destinies. And for Harry Potter, who had lived his entire life according to others' designs, that was the greatest magic of all. Epilogue: 6 months later, snow fell gently outside the windows of Grimmauld Place, transforming the normally dreary London square into a winter wonderland. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the once gloomy townhouse, now unrecognizable after months of renovation and renewal. Harry descended the stairs, drawn by the sound of conversation and the enticing aroma of holiday cooking. In the 6 months since Voldemort's final defeat and Dumbledore's arrest, he had grown nearly 2 inches, a growth spurt the healers attributed to the removal of long-term suppression compulsions. His hair, no longer enchanted to perpetual messiness, now fell in manageable waves that he'd chosen to keep slightly longer than before. More significant than the physical changes, however, was his overall demeanor. The constant tension that had characterized his earlier years had melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence and thoughtfulness that seemed to come naturally now that he was fully himself. "There he is," Sirius called as Harry entered the expanded kitchen. "We were about to send a search party." "Sorry," Harry grinned, taking his place at the table. "I was finishing up some correspondence." "Anyone interesting?" Remus inquired, looking up from where he was assisting Andromeda Tonks with an elaborate pastry construction. "McGonagall," Harry replied. The Board of Governors has approved all her proposed curriculum changes for next term. Hogwarts is officially entering what she's calling the post-Dumbledore educational paradigm. About time, Tonks commented from her position near the stove, where she was attempting to charm gravy ladles to self-stir with limited success. Any word on the ability assessment protocols? Starting in January, Harry confirmed. Every student will undergo comprehensive magical aptitude testing, not to sort or label them, but to identify suppressed talents and natural affinities that might have been overlooked under the old system. Or deliberately suppressed, Sirius added grimly, though his expression quickly brightened as the doorbell chimed. That'll be the Weasleys. Soon the kitchen was filled to capacity as the entire Weasley clan arrived, followed shortly by Neville and his grandmother, Luna and her father, and finally, to some initial awkwardness that quickly dissolved into the general festivity, Severus Snape. Harry watched with quiet satisfaction as the unlikely gathering settled into comfortable interaction. The past months had brought remarkable changes to many of those present. Ron, freed from his artificially induced jealousy and academic reluctance, had discovered a natural talent for magical architecture and was already designing modifications to the burrow that had professional builders impressed. Hermione had expanded beyond her compelled focus on academic authority to explore magical theory from a more creative and questioning perspective. And Ginny, perhaps most significantly, had emerged from the artificial romantic obsession Dumbledore had placed upon her to develop her own authentic personality and interests, primarily Quidditch, at which she was proving remarkably talented now that she was playing for herself rather than to impress Harry. Even Snape had transformed, though more subtly than some. While still reserved and occasionally acerbic, the artificial bitterness that had defined him for so many years had faded, allowing glimpses of dry humor and genuine intellectual passion to emerge. His relationship with Harry had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined previously, not quite friendship, not exactly mentorship, but a unique connection built on their shared history and the guardian bond that continued to link them. As dinner progressed, the conversation inevitably turned to recent developments in the ongoing process of dismantling Dumbledore's influence. The Wizengamot completed its review of all legislation passed during Dumbledore's tenure as Chief Warlock, Arthur Weasley reported. 37 laws have been identified as potentially influenced by compulsion during voting processes and are being reconsidered. And internationally? Augusta Longbottom inquired, her formidable presence somewhat softened by a festive hat adorned with animated snowflakes. The International Confederation has established permanent monitoring protocols to detect large-scale compulsion magic, Bill Weasley explained. They're calling it the Dumbledore Protocol, ironically enough. What about Dumbledore himself? Luna asked, her dreamy voice carrying easily across the table. Has his trial date been set? A brief silence fell, the mention of the former headmaster still capable of dampening spirits despite the festive atmosphere. March, Sirius finally answered. The full Wizengamot, with international observers present. The most significant magical trial since Grindelwald's. He'll spend the rest of his life in Azkaban, George predicted grimly. Actually, Harry interjected, I've been giving that some thought. All eyes turned to him, curious about his perspective on the fate of the man who had manipulated his life so thoroughly. Azkaban feels wrong, somehow, Harry continued carefully. Not because he doesn't deserve punishment, but because I'm not sure that's the most constructive approach. Locking him away doesn't help us understand or learn from what happened. What would you suggest instead? Snape asked, his tone neutral but his dark eyes intent. Something like a restricted research facility, Harry proposed. Where his intellect could be applied to beneficial magical development, but under constant supervision and with strict limitations on his personal magic. Use his abilities for genuine good rather than just containing him until he dies. Remarkably merciful, Augusta Longbottom observed, studying Harry with newfound respect. Not merciful, Harry corrected. Practical. Dumbledore did terrible things, but he also possesses knowledge and magical understanding that could benefit society if properly channeled. Wasting that in a prison cell seems short-sighted. The Harry Potter rehabilitation proposal, Fred quipped. turning dark lords and manipulative headmasters into productive citizens since 1993. The gentle teasing broke the tension, allowing conversation to flow into lighter topics as the meal continued. Later, as people migrated to the living room for dessert and drinks, Harry found himself momentarily alone in the kitchen, taking a quiet moment to absorb the remarkable reality of his current life. Contemplating the mysteries of the universe again, came Sirius's voice from the doorway, echoing their conversation from months earlier. Harry smiled, turning to his godfather. Just appreciating how much has changed. This time last year, I was at Hogwarts under dozens of compulsions, with a piece of Voldemort in my head, being guided toward a sacrificial role I knew nothing about. And now? Sirius prompted, leaning against the doorframe. Now I'm just, me, Harry replied simply. Figuring out who that is, one day at a time. Making my own choices. Living with family and friends who are also becoming their authentic selves. Sirius crossed the room to stand beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. James and Lily would be so proud of the person you're becoming, Harry. Not because you defeated Voldemort or exposed Dumbledore, but because you've maintained your compassion and integrity through it all. I had good examples, Harry acknowledged, including Sirius in his meaning. And I'm learning that strength doesn't have to come from power or control. It can come from connection, from authentic relationship. From the living room came a burst of laughter, Ron and the twins, by the sound of it, likely demonstrating some new magical invention or prank. The sound represented everything Harry had gained in the past months: genuine friendship, freely chosen family, a home filled with warmth and acceptance. We should rejoin the others, Harry suggested, moving toward the doorway. Before they send a search party. As they returned to the gathering, Harry took a moment to observe each person present, each now living as their authentic self after years of subtle manipulation. The changes were sometimes dramatic, sometimes subtle, but uniformly positive. Where Dumbledore had sought to create harmony through control, they were discovering a more profound harmony through freedom, the natural resonance of individuals living according to their true natures rather than imposed limitations. Later that night, as the gathering wound down and guests began departing, Luna approached Harry with her characteristic directness. "The Nargles say you found your center," she observed. "Your magical pattern has harmonized naturally. Is that good?" Harry asked, well accustomed now to translating Luna's unique perceptions. "It's how things should be," she replied simply. "Magic flourishing according to its natural design, not forced into artificial conformity." Her observation crystallized something Harry had been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. That's the fundamental flaw in Dumbledore's approach, isn't it? He tried to impose harmony from outside instead of allowing it to develop organically from within. Luna nodded, her silvery eyes bright with understanding. Exactly. True harmony can't be engineered, it can only emerge when each element is free to express its authentic nature while in relationship with others. A lesson for rebuilding magical society going forward, Harry mused. A lesson you're already teaching, Luna countered gently. By example rather than compulsion. As the last guests departed and Harry helped Sirius and Remus restore order to the kitchen, he reflected on Luna's words. Perhaps that was the most significant outcome of the collapsed control scheme, not just their personal liberation, but the opportunity to demonstrate a different path forward. One built on authentic self-expression, mutual respect, and freely chosen connection rather than manipulation and control. The future stretched before them, unwritten and full of possibility. Not the false harmony of Dumbledore's grand design, but something messier, more challenging, and infinitely more genuine, a world where people discovered their true selves and chose their own paths, creating patterns of connection that no single architect could have designed. For Harry Potter, formerly the boy who lived, formerly the intended harmonic focus, now simply a young wizard coming into his own power on his own terms, that future felt not like a burden, but a gift. A gift he intended to honor with every authentic choice, every genuine connection, every moment of living as his true self. The puppet strings had been cut. The dance that followed would be entirely their own. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.